Can everybody hear me? Okay. All right. Sorry, let me get my agenda up. All right. Welcome, everybody. This is the first meeting of June 2021. Ryan, let's do roll.
All right, Mayor Goetz.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Wellman. Mayor Pro Tem Wellman.
Here.
All right, Councilor Wusso. Councilor Wusso. You're muted.
Sorry, all. Yes, I am here.
All right, Councilor Hershey.
Yes, I am here too.
Councilor Stepp.
Yes.
Councilor Davis. And Councilor Kaut.
Here.
All right, we have a quorum.
All right. I will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, next item is agenda changes and conflicts. Yes, Councilor Hershey.
I don't know if this is appropriate, but I just wanted to say this early that on number 19, in case anybody's waiting around, and you may say this during your comments, Mr. Mayor, but this is just an opportunity to set a time for the annexation. We're not going to have any substantive discussion on 2110. Is that correct?
That's my understanding as well. So if folks are hanging out and want to hear us set a date, we won't be taking public comment. We'll just be setting a date for the hearing.
Unless we take public comment on the setting the date. I'm just kidding. Thank you.
I'll be doing it.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate that, Councilor Hershey.
Any other agenda changes or conflicts? I believe, oh, there we go. Yes, go ahead, Charlie.
Yeah, and item number 23, the financial advisory grants. I'm a member of the board of directors of Mountain Valley Developmental, Services and Riverbridge, which are regional center, both of which are potential recipients of grants. So I would ask those to be removed so I can vote on the remaining items. But I can't vote on those two, and if they're not removed, I can't vote on the item.
Thank you, Charlie. I think when we get there, we'll just remove items that people have agenda or conflicts of interest with. Paula, go ahead.
I have a similar concern to Charlie. There are 2 items on that agenda or on that list.
All right. Any other changes or conflicts of interest? All right, seeing none, we will go to citizens appearing before council. These are for items not appearing on the agenda. Mr. Fosnot, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good evening, council. I am here on behalf of the Parks and Rec Commission. We had a meeting last night where it was brought to our attention that there's an issue currently with regard to the use of the parks and whether or not there are requirements for special permits. I think this stemmed from, there was a fitness instructor who appeared before council, and I believe during council comments, they agreed to waive her having a permit for 45 days. This is brought to our attention, and the Parks and Rec Commission had a discussion last night, and we agreed, because our powers and duties of the Park and Recreation Commission, which we all were appointed by a council, are to investigate, study, and report to the city council all matters concerning city parks and recreation in the city, or to also, under the code, to investigate, study, and report to the city council on such matters concerning parks and recreation. And certainly the use of the parks for commercial activity is something that has occurred in the past. We allow commercial rafting, we allow fishing companies, we allow things like sports camps such as Game On in parks. We let the schools come into our parks. But we, as a commission, agreed that it was important that the council put this on the agenda and that you not proceed in an ad hoc basis, because proceeding on an ad hoc basis, there's no idea of how to proceed. And it seems like there could be some unfairness. We think that the code needs to be amended to allow for guiding criteria, and then regulations would be explored, investigated, studied, and reported back to City Council by the Parks and Rec Commission, which is what our role is. We think you need to explore fees, both as they impact the users and give cost recovery to the city. We also believe that people should be required to apply for permits. There should be several different types. There needs to be an effective enforcement mechanism so that commercial activities doesn't impact other users in the park. There needs to be some limits and restrictions so that you don't have multiple commercial activities taking place. There needs to be liability waivers and insurance. There needs to be some system in place for monitoring self-reporting and consequences for people who don't do that. We also need to look at whether there needs to be commercial uses on a seasonal basis, because impacts may have different impacts during different seasons. Finally, we want to make sure that the conduct of commercial activities in the park are appropriate. We want to make commercial activities easy and accessible, and we thought it was important to address this issue with council. Thank you.
Thanks, James. Appreciate that. We might have some comments when it comes to council comments in response to that. Bob Campbell, you have the floor.
Thank you, Jonathan. And interesting to follow up there on James's comments, why I'm interested in speaking with you all council folk this evening. I'm a Glenwood Springs resident and among other things, a freelance musician. About a year ago, with COVID, all of us being thick in it, I started trying to imagine how we might be able to utilize the plaza, Bethel Plaza under the bridge, especially with the restaurants kind of suffering from the COVID restrictions, and the plaza itself being kind of a real community focal point, especially for tourists when they come to visit the city. And also a way to help local musicians who were suffering from COVID, kind of taking away their opportunities to do as many gigs as they might be accustomed to. So had some discussions with Parks and Rec, got involved with the permitting system, came up with a way to be able to do that easily. And short summary of that was I organized 7 unique different musical performances that just happened as a background in the plaza, not anything that was advertised or put, promoted in to draw a big crowd, again, being sensitive to COVID. And the result of that was all very successful. I spent a lot of time opening dialogues with the restaurant owners, and they were very pleased with how that background music helped to bring some vibrancy to the plaza and elevate the liveliness of the outdoor seating especially. And I even did a survey, which I collected results and shared those with Parks and Rec, and be happy to share them with council at the appropriate time as well. So just being sensitive time here, the consensus amongst those restaurants were that it would be great to have more music in the plaza, but it needs to be managed somehow so that it's not just random people that sometimes go in there and turn up their amps too loud and create background noise that's not conducive to business. And I have looked at it from a number of angles and wanting to maybe develop this into some policies specific to music and specific to in the plaza. ideas like having a musician registry that musicians could apply for, and there might be an application fee for that. Possibly lowering that permit fee so it's specific to music that happens, and also the availability of when you can get permits or book sometimes in the plaza. So my proposal is really just to be able to put some of these things down in writing and have council look them over, possibly for an agenda item for the next meeting, and with the I guess objective of having you look over some of these ideas, consider them, and possibly be able to advise staff or commissions on how we might move forward, specifically with music in the plaza for starters. How's that for being on time?
Pretty darn good. Thank you very much, Bob. We appreciate those comments. I think that's very apropos to the first commenter's comments. So thank you for being efficient. Ryan, would you mind taking the timer off screen share for a sec so I can? Thanks. Sorry, I'm not able to see the attendees. Does anybody else from the public like to comment on items not appearing on the agenda? Allie Morrison, you have the floor.
And am I unmuted? Can you hear me now?
I can, yes.
Okay, good evening, council. I am just piggybacking on James's comments in the beginning. I'm a Glenwood Springs resident and homeowner and a business owner, and I had inquired with Karsten Moser about the likelihood of being able to conduct like yoga, stretching, or movement classes at Sullivan Park or any of the parks that are here in the east park of Glenwood Springs. And she said there was going to be a revision to the code. So I'm just more entering in a request to take a look at the revision of the code to be able to perhaps allow business owners, even if we're conducting maybe a class for donation or for a cause, if there might be a special permit that would be needed for that. My initial, in reaching out to her, we were still under a mask mandate. We were still under social distancing, and I was trying to find ways that would be have the ability for the community to come together in a healthy way, to be outside where it would be socially distanced. And I thought that doing yoga and stretching classes or meditation classes in some of the parks, if they were to be guided by community members who were not necessarily employees of Parks and Rec, that there might be an opportunity for that to happen. There's only a couple of months of the year where that could really happen, in my opinion, June, July, and August. And so I'm just wanted to say hello and just offer you my request and my point of view on that. Thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thanks, Allie. I really appreciate that. All right. There you go. Thanks, Ryan. A. Dieter, you have the floor.
Yes, hello. My name is Anne Marie Dieter, and I work at Colorado Mountain College. I too contacted Karsten, and because years previously, even before COVID, we have John Norton teaches Tai Chi for us. And so we've had a following for a number of years. And, you know, there's like 10 of them that have been doing it for about 10 years. And so recently we've started doing kids classes and kids camps. And so when we do that, when we have our camps, they aren't able to have their Tai Chi class in the gym. And so they kind of prefer outside. So they've been holding their class at Sayre Park. So we were just asking if they could continue that as well. I completely understand Mr. Fosnot, how he's saying that they do need to have some type of, you know, regulations and more standardization. So, you know, making a onesie, twosie case decisions is going to be difficult. But I just wanted to introduce ourselves and just kind of let you know, I think it's great. Even when I moved here, I love driving on Grand and seeing people in the park doing Tai Chi or yoga. I just think it's a great thing for our whole community. And so I just wanted to throw it out there and just kind of see where we're going. We have made some contacts with the high school, and we don't have a ton of room here, but we're just trying to switch gears and see where we can get these people to be able to do Tai Chi. So just hoping that you guys will consider that. And we do charge for our classes, but we try to structure it so that we really don't profit. We're just basically covering our costs is what we're trying to do as a community education service for the community. So anyway, thank you all for listening, and I'm interested in what you guys, the decisions you make. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, let's see, who else do we have? Anybody else from the public? Leave it open for a sec. Oh, let's see. Mr. Norton, go ahead. Mr. Norton, you need to unmute yourself as bottom lower left hand.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. We're good. We got you.
Thank you. My name is John Norton, and Anne Marie, who just spoke a moment ago, referenced me as being the Tai Chi teacher with CMC. I've been doing that for several years. And last year during the pandemic, we couldn't meet indoors. So we just loved going out to Sayre Park. So I just wanted to second her request that we be able to continue to do that. And also, I'm wondering if I can have the ability to have 3 or 4 sessions during the year on my own as a private Tai Chi in the park. That can be a wonderful experience to offer it to the entire community, not just to someone who's registered with CMC. So I guess a few things. I want to thank you for listening and entertaining our wishes, and hopefully the college will be able to continue Tai Chi in the park. And I'd also like to have my own permit to be able to do Tai Chi in the park for the whole community a few times a year.
All right. Thank you, John. Appreciate the call.
Thank you.
All right. Anybody else from the public? No. All right, going once, going twice. All right, next item on the agenda is council comments. Go ahead, Shelley.
Thank you. And I was hoping just to speak a little bit to this issue, and I appreciate the comments from the public about use of the park. And I also appreciate the comments from James from the Parks and Rec Commission. I don't think it's the intent of council to, just pass out permissions to use the park and bypass our system or anything like that. I think the decision that we made last council meeting was simply to allow that person to honor their request while we are getting these policies in place. But I would like to clarify, I think there seems to be some misunderstanding or understanding that we waived the permit or we waived the fees for that person. And I'd like to read the motion, actually, that Councilor Davis said, and he moved to allow Sharma Phillips a 45-day permit to hold her exercise class for no more than 2 days per week. So in my intention on seconding that motion and voting for that motion was that she would be allowed to have a permit, and, understanding in my thought that there may be a cost to that permit. I realize we need to get these policies in place, but I don't think it was council's council's intent to try to waive everything and waive permits. So I just wanted to clarify that based on the motion that we voted on. And still hoping that we can work through the Parks and Rec Commission and get their recommendations and work through staff to get some policies in place as quickly as possible. So just the comment on that. I have one second comment just on all the activity we've had for highway closures lately and accidents. I hope that everyone will try to drive safely and slow down. I don't know if it's possible for us to have a conversation with CDOT at some point and see if there are things that the city can do or have some input. I understand the speed limit was raised in the canyon last year when traffic was lower due to COVID. I don't know if that's affected the number of accidents we're seeing or not, but I would love to consider if council would be interested in maybe having a work session with CDOT and discuss if there are things such as TDM or other things we can do to help work on this issue, because the highway closures really affect us, our residents and our economy and everything else. Thanks.
Thanks, Shelley. Charlie, then Paula.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I guess I'm going to comment on the park permit issue because I was, I think, the longest sitting vote last meeting on this. The problem with what we do is when we start regulating from the dais, it isn't a good way to get policy and get policy decided. And anyway, I'll leave it at that. Given what Mr. Fosnot said, and I agree that the Parks and Rec should make this, I do also think that we need to get a decision sooner rather than later. So I'm cognizant of the government being slow and this summers around here being fairly short. So Mr. Fosnot is still out there. If he thinks we can get this to the Parks and Rec for a recommendation and back to us by preferably our first meeting in July, but if not our second meeting in July, that would be awesome. And that would be, I would ask if the council would join me in that request to Parks and Rec. And I'm not asking Parks and Rec to do a lot of extra stuff, but this is an important issue. And if we are going to do something, we should try to get it in place so that people can benefit from this summer, or at least know what the rules are for the summer. So that's one comment. The second thing is, I agree that the issue with the traffic through the canyon and the accidents is pretty bad. I was trying to take my granddaughter to dinner when they had the rollover at the truck right just east of the Glenwood interchange. I always forget which is which, 116, I guess that is. And it was just a nightmare in town. You couldn't even, get to the restaurants, with the traffic. So I think it's important. On the other hand, I think it's something that we ought to direct staff to work with CDOT. They're working with them on a number of issues with traffic. And I don't think we as council, again, need to get in those discussions. I think something that Deborah and her staff could work with CDOT and hopefully come up with some ideas of other things we can do, if anything. It just may be a function of traffic and the amount of traffic. And everybody is traveling. Everybody's sick of sitting in their houses for the last year. And so I think the traffic is exceptional right now. But my view is that ought to be a staff thing, not a council thing. Those are my comments. Thanks.
Really quick, Mr. Mayor, if I could just hop in to let Charlie know. Internally, we've made a commitment to have the framework for code changes, which won't be the full set of regulations that'll have to go with it, but it's the piece that has to go in the code, back to you for first reading at the next meeting regarding parks. And then those regulations and a second reading on the ordinance would come together hopefully in the first meeting in July. So we're already kind of pushing that timeline hard from an internal standpoint right now.
So what will we look at next meeting, Carl? I'm sorry, I didn't understand that.
So there's going to be a couple of things going on. I think there are some changes, structural changes in the code that need to happen. And then there are pieces of how you implement that code that you guys are going to want to look at, essentially the parks regulations that will probably be adopted via resolution when you, on second reading of that ordinance. It's going to take us a little longer to put those together. What does the application form look like? Maybe a recommendation on fees, those kinds of things. But that first structural piece, because the ordinance and the resolution, ordinance 2 readings, resolution 1, we think we can get that initial structural piece for the code done at the next meeting.
Okay, I just want about Parks and Recs. This is why we have this commission.
I was talking to,
Thank you.
talking to James and his, Parks and Rec, and talking to Brian, that we think we can get that done, and that gives them time to work on it because they understand the urgency of the issue as well.
Okay, thank you so much. And thank you for reminding me of doing that.
Thanks, Charlie. Paula, go ahead.
Wow, all these discussions kind of lead to me sharing that I have spent some time going back on the comprehensive plan just because of a decision that's coming up later tonight in the council meeting, and small town character, and an email, I believe, that was sent to all counselors about are we a dog friendly community? And it's hard because our comprehensive plan basically says it's a little bit subjective on what small town character is, and then they give some light items and goals of what that council wanted in 2011 and 2014. So it's made me rethink some decisions. But I guess my big one is I'm looking forward to seeing Carl and staff, what they come up with as far as adjusting this code a little bit so we can be a little bit more community friendly. We do a lot of stuff for tourists, and we want to also keep this a small town. And on that note, Deborah, really my question is going to come back to you on the dog thing. Is what is our policy? You said that you had explained it to the person, but is that something that council wants to consider just reviewing on, are we dog friendly, quote unquote? That was a quote they used. I just want to know what is our policy, and what is the regulation, and does it warrant any change? Once again, looking at the community side of our town and what we want.
It was the restaurant. I think the restaurant gave out bad information. We do not allow dogs to be left tied up alone.
Okay.
From what was described, that was not what happened, but we cannot, we can't control what restaurants tell people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's great. That's great to know that, because I had no idea. So that was that policy review, but really it's my intent is thank you, Deborah. That answers my question. I think we're good.
I think to that point, code enforcement was going to reach out to Angie Anderson to have the chamber maybe put something out to restaurants, but.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it. That was a big encompassing one comment about many things. There you go.
I like how you started big with comp penalty and just brought it down to the leash other. Thanks, Paula. Councilor Hershey.
Well, Paula, I think we'd be a much more dog friendly if we would ever fix our dog park up, but that's a conversation for another day. I wanted to echo what Shelley said and Charlie about the canyon. In my other job, I deal a lot with speeding in that canyon, and the variable speed went up in the summer to 60. That wasn't just a function of traffic, it's a lot of reasons, but trucks still have a lot of regulations and lane restrictions. And I would leave it to Deborah. I agree with Charlie, but if some sort of meeting with CDOT and maybe even with State Patrol would be helpful, because when a highway closes, it just doesn't cost us a lot of money. There's some figures, it's tens of thousands of dollars a minute every time a interstate is shut down for interstate commerce. So it hurts everyone. So I think we should look at that. Real quick, I do apologize. I was not here at 3 o'clock for your work session. My office is a little understaffed. If anyone other than Charlie has a bar number, or maybe Carl, and you want to apply, we're looking. I did get a chance though to read that survey, and I did write a response to the 6 of you, and I really am disappointed that this is a push poll. It's an advertisement. Some of those questions at the end about like, what would it take you to vote for a sales tax? Is just really not appropriate. I understand this is just in its infant stage, and you guys are going to talk about it. And I understand that Paula also had some concerns, but I'm going to do everything I can to oppose this publicly and in this forum. And this is really directed to the newspaper more than the 6 of you, that I'm going to wage a campaign against it, because I really, really think this is inappropriate. But that's why we have 7 voices. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Anybody else? Paula.
Sorry, I forgot to add this also. Bob Campbell had mentioned music in the plaza, and it would be interesting to see what he, just to review what his, he proposed this evening in a future council meeting.
Absolutely. I think that's a great thing to go through Parks and Rec Commission. Shelley, go ahead.
Can I also suggest that since that's an arts thing, we do have an arts and culture board, and I think they'd be really interested in weighing in on that or advocating for it.
Absolutely. Ingrid, go ahead.
So I didn't have a chance. I wasn't here 2 weeks ago. And so thank you. I want to thank the community members that brought up the parks, the use of parks for private services and events. But I also wanted to let you all know that I am the Parks and Rec Liaison. I went to the meeting last night. I think James did a really great job of conveying where we're all at. So did the other counselors. But I just really appreciate in advance staff and Parks and Rec as just all of the knowledge and the recommending body of Parks and Rec to come back with us with good feedback. I just thank them all in advance because I know that having listened to them last night, the issues that they raised, you know, they're very comprehensive. They have a really solid understanding of all this. And I know that if nothing else, this is a great opportunity for the community to step back and give feedback and be heard. And at the same time, we're always a moving body of land use and saying what's appropriate for right now. So I really do thank everyone who's going to be helping with that.
Thanks, Ingrid. Anybody else? Okay, I also want to thank James Fosnot for his comments tonight. I think that board and commission does a great job. I think we have a lot of great boards and commissions. I'm definitely looking forward. I know there's some conversation about exploring kind of in general what boards and commissions roles are and how we can be supportive of them and they can be supportive of us. So I'm looking forward to that conversation. I wanted to mention that Glenwood Springs has been recognized for our response to the 2020 pandemic with the newly announced 2021 Governor's Award for Downtown Excellence by Downtown Colorado Inc. So I want to give the city, which is, I guess, kind of us a little bit, but mostly staff, mostly Matt Nunez and Jen Newton and Deborah and a lot of other people, a lot of credit. You guys did a great job of identifying opportunities to bring to us. I'm breaking my arm here, Brian. We did a great job saying yes to a lot of those things. Things like the outdoor dining, the bubbles, the blankets, the space heaters, the outdoor dining structures that people still use. You know, these really helped our community get through some of the worst of COVID. I know the businesses were really appreciative. Obviously, we had a massive grant program where we gave restaurants significant rounds, plural, of funding and warming grants as well. So just want to thank staff almost exclusively, really. I'm kind of joking. I guess, you know, we deserve a little credit, but it really is all staff. So thank you very much. Deborah, who did I miss and what did I miss in that, in my brief thank yous?
You definitely missed Parks and Recreation, which kept everything clean during that time with extremely limited staffing.
Absolutely. Brian Smith and your staff, that was Herculean. And I know they did have some COVID issues running through and having that staffed, as well as we did we laid off all of our part-time staff for a large part of COVID. So doing that all with full-time people who are not used to running the hot seat and doing those things is great. So thank you, Brian, very much.
And the Chamber and the DDA, and I will stop talking.
And the Chamber and the DDA. And anybody else? Anybody else I forgot? I'm sorry. I'll write a letter to the paper thanking you later. I wanted to say to Allie, for the yoga instructor, that you know, there is an option. You can become a part-time employee of the city if you want to run those programs for the public. It's a pretty easy process. Fill out an application. John Norton, the Tai Chi instructor, my neighbor Mike Sussman has been bending my ear about this since day one, so I'm very familiar. You do a great service. I love my neighbor, and thank you for doing the things that you do. I also want to take this opportunity to apologize. Last meeting, I wasn't fair. I was a little passionate about some topic. I didn't really know what it was, but I questioned people's motives. I questioned our chief's motives. Some of you, when I said that you were making moral determinations and not land use applications, and that was really unfair of me. I want to apologize to all of you guys, as well as our chief. I sure enjoy serving with you, and that's really kind of crappy of me. And I love our chief. He is fantastic. He is a huge asset to our community. He's doing really great and innovative things with the police department. This is going to become quickly a destination job for a lot of people in law enforcement because of his leadership. So Chief Darris, I thank you for what you do. You have a really difficult job, and sometimes it's made more difficult by when people say things that without a lot of thought, like I did last week. So I think that's all I have. Are there any further comments? No? Okay. Next item on the agenda. Let me get to that. Hold on, I'm coming. There we go. Oh, consent. There we go. It took kind of a, thanks, Charlie. Charlie, can you give me a motion to approve consent agenda?
I would move to approve the consent agenda.
And I'll second his motion.
All right, been moved by Charlie. All those in favor signify by saying aye or raising your hand, thumb.
Aye.
Any opposed? Tony, I'm sorry, was that a for or nay? I'm sorry, it's kind of in between. Yes, of course. Motion carries unanimously. All right, next agenda item is item number 18, planning file 6920. This is continued special use permit for retail marijuana at 2114 Grand Avenue. This is continued from the May 20th, 2021 meeting.
Mr. Mayor, I think I'm going to open this. So you were in the middle of trying to make a motion to approve or deny this at the last meeting. You hung up on a 3-3 to approve. And I think there was some struggling with whether or not there were conditions that may or may not have made that palatable or not. And so I suggested that you continue it until you have a full council, and then we wound up with another 6-member council. So it goes sometimes as the attorney. That having been said, I do want to open tonight with a couple of things. One is that because the 2 motions that had been made on the floor, one was a motion to approve, the other was to continue, that the next motion needs to be a motion to deny. If there is no motion, or if such motion were to be made and died for lack of a second, then it's kind of a free-for-all on what you guys want to do. I also am going to read into the record an email received at 4:54 p.m. from Mr. John Diet at Kind Castle. It was sent to Trent Hyatt in planning. It copied Chris at Alpine Planning LLC and Trevor McGarvey at, I believe it's the McGarvey law firm, or something to that effect. The reason I'm going to read it into the record for right now is because we did not have an opportunity due to its late arrival to upload it to the packet. I did have an opportunity to forward that to council, so they had a copy to review. I am going to suggest, well, let me read it and then I'll make my suggestion on how to move forward with that particular issue. So this again is from Mr. John Diet. He is the Kind Castle either owner or representative. It says, "Hi Trent, due to the procedural violations at the previous hearing, the applicant is requesting to speak/rebuttal at tonight's meeting. I just want to also put in writing that several council members, including Charlie and Tony, have clearly shown biased behavior and have prejudged this application. In addition, we believe their behavior constitutes conflicts of interest and request a recusal from voting. Tony said from the beginning that he wouldn't be in favor of this application, which is before we even submitted it. Charlie is a disgrace, no explanation needed. Ingrid, although I hope she renders her decision with a fair approach tonight and would appreciate her reviewing this from how the ordinance is written, not moral preference or personal bias, close paren. She has clearly expressed biased behavior and prejudged this application. Shelley's vote should not count when it's based on number of schools and proximity to Highland Park. When other marijuana stores were approved in the same, similar, or much shorter distances to schools/parks, Shelley has based her decision on information that is not outlined in the city code. Therefore, she cannot be trusted to vote the city regulations require, or vote as the city regulations require. All this and more is on record at previous meetings/hearings. Thank you. Kind regards, John Diet.
So Carl, does that mean only Jonathan can vote on this?
I'm not going to actually opine on that. I do think that in the interest of affording additional due process to Mr. Diet, although this hearing had been closed, I would suggest that you give him 5 minutes to speak on this matter. I would also caution council not to make a decision tonight based on what were in some instances very personal attacks against you individually. This is a land use hearing in which you have to sit as an impartial judge. I know that these remarks may be inflammatory for you, or you may take some personal umbrage with them. I again caution you to look to the record in terms of making your decision this evening. I would also point out that in order to approve this application, there are a series of findings that you must make, and those are contained within the staff report. Those are not optional findings, and the failure of a finding on any one of those could result in a denial of this application. I would point out that in the record, there is ample evidence on both sides of this issue, including a detailed letter on behalf of the neighbor from Garfield and Hecht PC as their attorneys. So all of that information is in front of you when you do make a decision. With that, I will turn it over to the mayor if he and the council would like to allow Mr. Diet to speak or not. That is your decision. Thank you very much.
I'm inclined on council's recommendation to allow the applicant 5 minutes of time to respond. Does anybody have an objection to that? Yes, Councilor Hershey.
Sorry, I was muted, Mr. Mayor. That's hard to say, muted, Mr. Mayor. No, I would agree to give him the 5 minutes. I'm sorry, I'm echoing. And I think that that would be appropriate. I am curious, Mr. Mayor, what your thoughts are. As Mr. Hanlon alluded to, we are short again, and there are only 6 people here. But I don't know that that doesn't mean we can't have a substantive vote, but I guess we could continue it one more time till there's a full council. And I would be open to that too. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I think we don't necessarily need to have a full council for every vote that we take. I think that's fair, Councilor Hershey, to question that. But Councilor Davis's vote was recorded. And I think if it's another 3-3 vote, I mean, in that case, then we will obviously take it. If it's not a 3-3 vote, then his vote wouldn't have mattered substantially to the outcome anyway. So I guess let's take the vote. And then if it does deadlock again somehow in a 3-3, we will then take a continuance and bring it up again.
I would also like to just, Councilor Russo, confirm that you did have the opportunity to review the entirety of the recording from the last meeting, allowing you to sit on this application, and that you were here, I believe, at the hearing before that, where you heard presentations as well.
I did. I had an opportunity to review all of that, thoughtfully consider it all, and also apply my background on planning and zoning to just know the diplomacy behind it, that this is a land use application. So I appreciate you clarifying.
Thank you.
Any other opinions on specifically the allowance of the 5 minutes? Okay. I'm going to say, let's go ahead and do this. If that's, Charlie, what you were going to suggest. Okay. I don't see a hand other than Trevor McGarvey, and I'm going to assume that this is the counsel for the applicant. If that is the case, Mr. McGarvey, if you would identify yourself, I will cede the 5 minutes to you. Go ahead, Mr. McGarvey, you have the floor.
Okay, I just unmuted. Sorry, this is a little different format than I'm used to with the Zoom meetings. In any event, yes, my name is Trevor McGarvey. I am the attorney for the Kind Castle, specifically for this iteration of the application at Grand Avenue. And I guess I'd just like to start and walk back some of the things Mr. Diet said in his email. I think we had concerns, and not only members of the Kind Castle, but also some people I talked to in the public had concerns about the way the last hearing was handled, some of the comments that were made by city council members that might tend to indicate that they weren't giving this a fair shake, or they weren't neutrally deciding it based on what the municipal code set forward. So basically what we wanted to do was just kind of remind the council members that I don't know, I think in the instance of having members recuse themselves, I know that's a drastic remedy, and I'm not sure that in every instance there has been, a full bias shown to that extent. But I do think that some of the ways that the council members handled the hearing, I think it was on May 20th, would indicate that they weren't neutrally reviewing the application pursuant to the requirements that are set forth. And I think the biggest issue we had was it was almost kind of like this contentious back and forth between Charlie and Mr. Diet. And I'd also just like to say, if anybody knows about, there's been a bit of a history between the city of Glenwood Springs and Mr. Diet applying for dispensaries. So there has been a couple different instances where there was a lot of money laid out, a lot of time put into the process. Applications and licenses were granted by the local licensing authority and the hearing officer in the past, and then overturned on appeal by the city council. So I think some of Mr. Diet's frustration is just with kind of having put so much time and effort into trying to make this work, getting recommendations from city council, from planning and zoning, relying on those recommendations, putting money into them, only to find out later that the license was to be denied. And not to say that it was guaranteed, but specifically with regards to this application, I know that the Planning and Zoning Committee and I believe the City Council basically set forth a list of things for us to do. And we relied on that list and went ahead and tried to do everything that they had requested or recommended. And in some instances, those things cost a lot of money. And then to get to the hearing, where I think some of the city council members' reasoning behind their denial didn't exactly conform to what the decision was made on, or what the decision was supposed to be made on per the Glenwood Springs Municipal Code. Specifically, the code sets out what the decision is made on in this instance, and what the city council members are supposed to decide based on. And as far as I know, in the recommendation from planning and zoning and everybody, all the, let's say, physical requirements or the factual requirements were met. So there wasn't anything that was outstanding that the applicant did not meet. And then as far as the schools and the parks being cited, we applied at a location that met all the existing setbacks and all the restrictions that the municipal code had set forth. On top of that, I think there are a couple different existing dispensaries that have either a school or a park, a lot closer to them than this particular location. I think Martin's in particular has either a store or a park within 37 feet. And I think the park in terms of this location is about 150 feet away. So all we can do is apply with an application and a location that meets the setbacks and the restrictions that we have or that exist at the time of our application. And in this case, we did that. The location was compliant. We made the changes that were recommended. And just to touch on the parking plan, there's been 2 parking plans proposed. I know Mr. Dye had proposed one, and additionally, City Council or the Planning and Zoning Commission proposed an alternate parking plan. And as a practical matter, the applicant is prepared to go with either of those parking plans if it helps the council alleviate any of the concerns that they may have. And I mean, in that vein,
Mr. McGarvey, we're at 5.5 minutes right now.
okay.
You finish up your last thoughts, that'd be welcome. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, just in summary, I'd say the requirements of the application in terms of the location, the physical requirements, the operating plan, and all that stuff have been met. There's been no evidence and nothing talked about that stuff wasn't met. And I would just like to remind and ask the city council members to make the decision based on what the municipal code and the Planning and Zoning Commission basically recommended that the decision is to be made on.
All right. Thank you very much. All right, we'll bring it back to council.
Mayor, if I could just follow up a little bit. I know that you probably saw it too, that Mr. Dyer also has his hand up. I'm going to recommend that, given that he's represented by council spoke to the issues in the email, that you guys move on. Taking comment at this point in the public hearing, after the public hearing had been closed, is somewhat out of order anyway. And I would once again remind you that there are a series of requirements that they need to meet in terms of the code, that you must make findings in the affirmative on to approve the application, and should make findings on if you're going to deny the application. The other thing that I would tell you is that neither the staff recommendation nor the Planning Commission recommendation is binding on you as a body. This is in fact a de novo review for your purposes. Those are recommendations, not an appeal in which you would be limited to the record. And so should you have alternate findings from the Planning Commission or an alternate view of how the code applies to the Planning Commission or staff, that is well within your purview and is why this application's final decision maker is you and not the Planning Commission and not staff. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Paul. All right, I'll bring it back to council for a motion or further comment. Ingrid, go ahead.
I actually would like to make a motion to deny this. So in planning item 6920, consideration of a special use permit for a retail marijuana establishment. I do find, and believe me, when I went through everything, I find that it's incompatible with the surrounding area. The impact of the use on the surrounding area has not been adequately minimized. And for me, most influential is that I don't believe that this is in conformance with the comp plan or the city plans and policies.
There's a motion by Councilor Wusso to deny. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, been moved by Ingrid, seconded by Tony. Further conversation? Charlie, go ahead.
Well, first of all, I think you need to address the fact that and somebody believes that I have a conflict of interest in this matter. I don't believe I have a conflict of interest. And I have not pre-decided the issue before reading the materials and listening to the public input. So the record is clear. And the fact that I was disparaged in the email doesn't impact my decision whatsoever. The nature of my practice of laws, I've had lots of names called at me over my career, and that's Mr. Dye's point of view. He certainly is entitled to his point of view about my viewpoint. And I would note that my comments that were mentioned by Mr. McGarvey, at least I think the ones he was referring to, were directed toward Mr. Hawkins. And what I said to Mr. Hawkins is that I appreciated his thoughts, but I did not appreciate the personal attacks on our chief of police. I didn't think that was necessary, and that's the way I perceived his comments. But I will also say that that is not part of my decision. Finally, as far as my vote, which is going to be to support the motion, I agree with Ingrid. I don't think that the uses are compatible with the surrounding area. And I'm going to cite some of the reasons why. I think it's not compatible with the neighboring properties. I've been in and out of that property under its current uses. And I appreciate a lot of the things that the applicant has done to make it a better applicant than we saw a year ago. And I think they really have made some efforts, and I appreciate that. But I still can't support it because I still am concerned, as I mentioned at the meeting 2 weeks ago, about the ability of people to get in and out of there safely. Highway 82, particularly on that side of the road, but even on the other side, go in the morning southbound, and it won't be open. Probably wouldn't have rush hour traffic in the morning, but it will be open in the afternoon. We have rush hour traffic coming by the entrance to this property. I think this is going to increase the use on that property, and I believe that that's going to make that a dangerous area for people entering and exiting, even if they can exit right only, which the applicant is proposing. I don't think that solves the problem. And people stopping there to turn in to buy product, which is fine. And I'm not against marijuana in any fashion whatsoever. I voted.
Just to interrupt, I think we're relitigating we've had council comments. I just don't want to relitigate the entirety of the whole thing.
I'm not, but I think it's important that the record reflects why my decision is there and I appreciate their challenge, but this is based on a factual decision by me, not an emotional or any other decision. So, I'm sorry, I probably ran out more than I need to, but I don't think it is compatible with the surrounding area or Grand Avenue. I don't think it's an appropriate place. Traffic stopping for people to pull in that, and I'll leave that issue. I also don't think that the impact of the surrounding area has been minimized. I think that it's a high impact use around an area that has a viable business operation that could have a negative impact on it. I voted for the Kind Castle's other location, and I felt that was an appropriate location. So it's not anything about the applicant. I'll stop.
Okay, thanks, Charlie. Shelley, do you have any comments about the motion on the table?
Yes, I'd just like to make a comment about the motion and about the email that was received. Just, I will not be changing my vote from last time. Actually, the last vote, I voted to uphold the P&Z decision and voted in favor of approval of the applicant. I do believe that it's in conformance with our codes and comp plans, and I agree with the decision of P&Z and staff. I would just like to point out to the applicant's email that I think they have me confused with a different counselor, and I would appreciate just that they kind of get the record straight. Thank you.
Councilor Wusso.
I think more than anything, I just also wanted to convey just a gratitude to the applicant for bringing this to us, and that, you know, they have the location in the Meadows, which I wish them all the success in running a business, that we as a community and a council are in gratitude for this industry and what it brings to our community. And in this situation, I just felt that the use didn't comply with the location. So that was where my decision came from. So thank you again.
Any other comments? I'll just make a comment on the motion. Councilor Wusso, your argument has swayed me. I will be voting in favor of the motion as well. Thank you for bringing up those points I hadn't previously considered. So we have a motion and a second. Further conversation? All right, Ryan, let's call the question.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilming.
Yes.
Councilor Cow.
No.
Mayor Godis.
Yes.
Councilor Hershey.
Yes.
Councilor Wusso.
Yes.
Councilor Stepp.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-1.
All right, thank you, and thank you to the applicant. All right, next item is number 19, resolution 20-10, a resolution finding substantial compliance of petition for annexation with CRS 3112-107 and setting a public hearing regarding eligibility for annexation of the property located at 214 Center Drive. Thank you, Councilor Hershey, for your previous suggestion or information that this is not any conversation. Is just for setting a public hearing. So we won't be taking public comment on it, but whoever needs to speak to it, go ahead, Carl.
No, absolutely. Thanks a lot, Mr. Mayor. So we don't do a ton of annexations. Obviously, one of the statutory requirements is a resolution finding substantial compliance, which if you read through the resolution, it's just a series of things. Do they have continuity with the city? A number of those kinds of things. Did they file their petition? All of that. It is statutorily driven that we need to set a hearing between 30 and 60 days from today to hear this application. Something that we have had quite a bit of discussion about is this, as you know, is an application that is both large and of great interest to the public. We just wrapped up at the Planning Commission just last month or this month. I've lost what month we are, last month. And we anticipate, I think, several hours of testimony and hearings. I actually don't think we're going to get this done in one evening, probably, and certainly it would take up the entirety of a city council agenda if we scheduled it on a regular agenda night. There are a couple of, we've been trying to find dates that work kind of generally with the applicant schedule that are also after the date which we are back in chambers and in person, because I think that will be helpful with this application since we have the opportunity to do that. I think the two potential dates that we have talked about, and I also recognize for everybody's benefit that we may not be able to get everybody to the hearing because of summer vacation schedules. I recognize that we're asking you to do stuff on off weeks. I think the two dates that have been that have the highest probability of working for everybody are the 19th or the 29th. And so I'm just going to try to work with everybody. It's a lousy way to do it on the fly, but it's kind of what it requires me to do with this resolution. So
Carl, are you saying the 19th or the 29th of July?
Of July. My apologies. 19th, 29th of July.
As much as I want to spend a Saturday night here. So what do you foresee as a time frame for that in July?
My suggestion is we probably on that first night go from say 6 to 9 or 10 and try to get through, if we can, get through staff and applicant presentations as well as public comment. And I just got a text from Jen that Trent is out on the 19th, so that date is probably off the table as well. So maybe, I know Jonathan is out of town on the Thursday. Let me get a calendar up here.
I don't want to interrupt, but I'm going to interrupt and ask, is it possible for us to do it Zoom in the event that people are out of town? Like, can we make that?
Here's the thing. I am recommending heavily against participating via Zoom for these right now. One, because I don't know how good the technology is going to be yet, right? And two, it's hard to see all of the same things in council chambers. I do know that we're going to be asking you to watch the recordings, which is kind of the same thing, but also a little different than when you're trying to actively engage. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at on that. My suggestion, I guess what I'd suggest is that we have probably the 22nd or the 29th as off Thursdays. I know Jonathan is out on the 22nd. But just if those, and like I said, I know Charlie is out on the 29th to visit family. I don't anticipate that being the only night. And there again, if you watch the tapes and all of that, I think we would be set up to take action probably at another meeting, just because I know it's going to take time. So thoughts?
I'm out of town the week of the 19th.
Okay, so I'm thinking, I know, Charlie, I hate to do that to you. I'm thinking the 29th, and then we'll just get you caught up if the decision gets made after that. Does that work for you?
Yeah, I think I'm going to be in York, which is a couple hours, ahead. So if it starts at 6, I agree. I was thinking Zoom, but then I remembered that, you kind of commented that we were going to talk about that kind of issue later in the meeting tonight. But I'm going to be able to actually watch it, not participate, but watch, log in and watch the meeting. So, and I'll most likely do that. It's easier for me to watch it in person than to watch it as a video later. So,
right. Yeah, fair enough.
Ingrid?
I honestly, we have a trip that we're planning for about that time, but I'll just work around it. So whatever date I'll make work.
Shelley?
Did we have a show of hands, or I can make it on the 29th, so.
I think we've got everybody. If you can make it on the 29th, could you raise your hand? Cool. All right. And
Question though, Carl.
Yeah.
If Charlie's in New York City on the 29th, nothing prohibits him from watching the meeting either that night live or, as you said, in the future. Right?
Right.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right. I believe the way the resolution is currently set up, let me pull it up because I've changed it like 4 times. It is set for the 29th in the resolution, so I think you can just pass it as drafted. Yes.
Mr. Mayor, I would make a motion to pass Resolution 2110, a resolution finding substantial compliance of petition for annexation, referring to CRS 3112-107, and setting a public hearing regarding eligibility for annexation property located at 214 Center Drive for July the 29th. That's a Thursday at 6 o'clock, Mr. Hanlon?
Yes.
Yes.
I'll second the motion.
We had
Thank you, Shelley.
typo in the heading, so we'll fix that before it gets
That's
signed.
the heading. What did I do wrong?
Nothing, you did everything right. I just noticed that I missed the heading, changing the date. So
Okay, so July 29th though.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Been moved by Tony, seconded by Shelley. Further conversation? All right, Ryan, let's call the question.
Counselor Wusso,
Yes.
Counselor Stepp,
Yes.
Counselor Hershey,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wellman,
yes.
Mayor Godis,
Yes.
Counselor Cow.
Yes.
It's unanimous.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Next item is item number 20, community cleanup discussion. Matt Langhorse, you are promoted. Anybody else I need to promote? Okay.
I see Mr. Boyd as well, Mr. Mayor. Is that correct? No. Thanks. I see Matthew. Sorry, I didn't see him.
Mr. Mayor, could you bring Liz Morrow across also? She's in the attendees.
Yes, I can. Anyone else?
That will do.
All right. Go ahead, Matt.
Good evening, council. Before I do anything else and move on with this item, I would like to introduce Liz. Liz is actually our new landfill manager. She's taken over King's position. She's done a great job of it so far. Hopefully she's got a good enough connection. She can wave and say hi.
Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you.
Hi, Liz.
Do we have 30
Hi.
to 60 seconds for Liz to give a little background on Liz?
We have at least 120 seconds, at least.
At least 120 seconds. Liz, you want to tell them a little bit about you?
Sure, great. Thank you, Matt, for the introduction. Hi, nice to see all of your faces on here. Charlie, I've met you before. I'm in your district. So my name is Liz Morrow. I'm your new landfill manager, and I'm coming to you straight from the Pitkin County landfill, where I worked for 3 years. Before that, I worked for Aspen Sanitation District up in Aspen. But I've been with you guys for 2 months already right now. And so far, loving every day of it. It's super exciting. And really looking forward to working with you guys on a lot of landfill issues and waste reduction issues in the future. So thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah. Just so you know, Liz was, I believe, compliance manager, compost manager, construction manager. I can list things off at Pitkin County. She comes well qualified for what we're doing up at the landfill. And she'll be able to help us refresh all kinds of operations we have up there and make things better. So we'll be coming to you guys probably several times over the next 12 months to bring you new ideas, new thoughts, probably some new fee structures, a few other little things here and there. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. And then we'll move into the larger conversation of what do we call it? Community Cleanup Day. It's actually a community cleanup weekend. So August 21st, we are already going to have the Hazardous Waste Day. We didn't have it last year. Usually we have it in the spring. We wanted to keep it this year because I know everybody's building up their paint cans and their oils, and they want to get rid of those things. So we're going to have Hazardous Waste Day, August 21st. Bree has already figured out a way to make it so people can go online instead of having to call the landfill to set up the times, because everybody has to call ahead. You get a little reservation spot. I can't remember if it's 5 or 10 minutes, but you reserve your time ahead. You show up at that time. We dispose of your hazardous wastes, and the landfill basically pays for a lot of that unless you're an out-of-city person, and then you'll actually have some fees associated with it. It's all in the standard operating procedures for the Hazardous Waste Day. That is not really the reason we're here. The reason we're here is to see what kind of interest council has in making this kind of a weekend event where we would stage, I haven't talked to Brian about it fully, but probably at the community center in the upper tier of the parking lots, and have availability for people to bring metals and mattresses and furniture, wood products, those kinds of things. We'll get a very specific list to the community center. Probably breaking it into 2 days. Friday day would be, hey, you bring it to us day. And then Saturday, we would break it up as, depending on how many teams we can get, either from Rotary or Lions or whatever community sponsors we can get, how many teams we can have. They would go out and collect items, because one of the comments has been on the vouchers is people don't own trucks. So they don't have the ability to put larger items in a truck that they don't own and bring them to the landfill with the vouchers that we have. So we're trying to kind of alleviate that situation towards the end of the year, so that people are ready to go for fall and into the winter time and have those pieces of furniture or whatever it is disposed of. Sorry, my staff report is terrible. It's not formatted correctly. I don't know what happened when I hit save, but generally the idea is Friday would be, you bring it to us. We'll have some city crews there, myself there. We'll sort out all the materials that are brought to us, put them in the appropriate cans. We want to get metal into metal, so it's not going to the landfill. We want to get the products that we can basically grind up and put in our grind pile, put in the other cans. They'll be brought to the landfill so that they're not automatically going right into the landfill. They could go into the compost. It might become daily cover, whatever they're going to be at that moment, but using those materials more efficiently than we have in the past. And like I said, on Saturday, we'll kind of correlate the two. Hazardous Waste Day will happen. You'll have the ability to sign up for that. And then you'll also have the ability to have us come get things from you if you don't have the ability to bring them to us. So I kind of want to just throw it at you guys and just see what you think. Is this worth it? I believe we have enough money in the streets department, disposal fees budget, that we can cover this. So it's really not hitting a budget anywhere negatively. And it would give people the opportunity to get rid of some of those wastes that they've been storing.
Paula.
Love this. This is great, Matt. Thank you so much. One question: when we had hazardous waste days in the past, there was a drop-off location in town as opposed to going out to landfill. And I was trying to discern what you were saying there. Was that at the landfill, or can we do that in town?
No, I'm sorry. That would be in town still this year. Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Charlie. Charlie, did I kill your video? There you are. Charlie, are you trying to unmute yourself? There you go.
Yeah, I froze for a minute, but I'm back.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Tony, go ahead.
I just wanted to thank you, Matt, with the pandemic, and then we've had for a couple of years now, not the spring cleanup. I think this is a great idea. I wanted to thank you and Liz. I think it's a great idea. Good job. Thank you.
Charlie.
Is that me?
That is you.
Okay, sorry. I'm trying to make sure everything's working on the computers. Yeah, my only question, Matt, and I appreciate you only want to do 2 days, but having people drop things off on a Friday is a little difficult for people who work. And I'm sure you thought about that, but got your comment. I really appreciate this. I think it's a great idea, but that's my only concern that I see in the plan itself.
That was our concern also, but we can't have people kind of dropping off trash and hazardous waste day and doing collections all on Saturday. It's just not a big enough area to kind of accommodate all of that. We could maybe stay open a little bit later. It'll be still summertime if we want to, so people can come later in the day. We'll kind of talk about what the time frames are going to be. The problem will be is some of the cans will have to go to the landfill because we'll probably only have 2 or 3. Depending on usage, we may fill those up and they have to go before the landfill closes at the end of the day. So we'll kind of have to play that by ear a little bit. It wasn't preferred option for us either for having drop off on Friday, but we couldn't really come up with a better idea with hazardous waste day already being on Saturday and all that traffic coming in that we know will be a lot of traffic from the past. That will correlate with traffic from collections also coming in. I don't want to add a whole another level of traffic into that small area. If we had a larger area to accommodate for this, which we don't currently, it would be easier to have drop off also occur on Saturday.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Shelley.
Thanks, Matt. And thanks, Liz, for bringing this to us. Appreciate it. As you know, I'm a fan of spring cleanup, the old style spring cleanup. So my first question is this intended to be permanent going forward, or are we still just talking about kind of post-pandemic?
And I noticed since it kind of got muddled up a little in the staff report because of formatting, that the spring cleanup discussion is still going to be, it still has to happen this year on whether we're doing that next year or not. I think Deborah has some ideas on how to accomplish that if it's to be. And if not to be, then we can continue to do something to this effect.
Okay. I was going to recommend that we, if it's something that council really wants to do, that we should consider it in the, the budget process, and that we should really contract it out. Right now, we don't, I don't even know if I have the park staff to pull off in the springtime to do it. And it's really difficult having our highly skilled streets crew doing this when they should be filling potholes and working on concrete. So it's really an opportunity loss discussion you guys need to have, whether, we should pay more to contract it out, or we should pay a lot more in labor and do it in-house. And what are we not doing?
Right.
When we're
and I've heard that discussion. Yes. I've also seen there are a lot of cities that still do it. So I don't know if the rest of council is interested, but I do still hope that we can have a good discussion on that during budget. I know also that, the trade-off was that we were going to get a lot more pothole filling if we didn't do spring cleanup. There was some, I didn't see as much as I expected. Maybe my expectations were too high, but I know we're coming out of the pandemic, so this spring has been difficult, but I'd love to see us have a good discussion about that in the future. Do we have any idea what this is going to cost? Or was that in the memo, or did I miss it, Matt?
No,
okay.
we're kind of budgeting about $10,000 for it.
Okay.
I can't remember what the budget is right for trash, but we're budgeting about $10,000 out of the street department, street tax to accommodate for this. It should be nowhere near that. We kind of threw a bigger number at it just to see because it kind of got blended in again. But if there's something else you wanted to do after this, if you wanted to have a band at Two Rivers Park to celebrate spring cleanup day, or, what you wanted to do, the first day will basically just be feeding the crews and anybody on the ground, which would be a small amount of money, a couple pizzas here. Second day, we talked about we're going to have volunteers there for a duration of time, and their hours will overlap over lunch. So we'd probably feed them hamburgers and hot dogs and things. It shouldn't get too expensive.
Great.
It was more of,
I think that's a great idea. Yeah. Yeah, that's a great idea. And I really appreciate, and I love the idea of using the volunteers. I think some of those service organizations would love to take part in that. My last question was on the brush and leaves. So I know the last couple of years, the rodeo grounds is really filled up and busy doing like staging for South Midland. I totally get that. Could there be a separate event in the fall, or will we have leaf drop off again that's convenient in town? Because that's another one that leaf and brush, and that can go directly into the compost and, with grinding and stuff. So just wondering if that will be a service that we can provide maybe later too.
We'll definitely do leaf drop off again this year. We'll clean up our little area of the rodeo ground. So we'll do leaf and Christmas tree drop off just like we do every single year. Gould has kind of taken over a large section of the rodeo grounds down there for South Midland construction, which is completely understandable. There's really no place to stage out there except for that one location. So now brush becomes more complicated. It's just very bulky. And we basically have to grind it before we throw it in a truck, which becomes complicated too. So I could talk to Jake and Jake about that. We have two Jakes now, and see if we have any space down there to accommodate that or the manpower to do it. A lot of times when we do Christmas trees or any storm collection, when we have, large storms that blow a lot of trees down, sometimes we try to talk parks into helping us up. We'll gather it. Let's throw a couple crews at it to grind it up and bring it out to the landfill to be used in the compost. So TBD, let me talk to the guys and see how much room we're going to have out there if we can expand that discussion.
Okay, that might be something helpful. That's something that I know a lot of the spring cleanup piles were usually full of a lot of brush and things because it is a bulky thing. It's harder for people to get rid of. But anyway, thank you. I really appreciate this idea and kind of transitioning the program. So it's great. And thanks very much.
Hop in, Liz.
Don't wait.
Okay. Thanks, Matt. So Shelley, I just wanted to add on to your question there about how much things cost. We have $30,000 budgeted for the hazardous waste cleanup. So that's separate from the other cleanup.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And that comes out of the landfill budget.
Okay. Thank you. And that is a very helpful program to be able to get rid of that hazardous waste. So thanks for doing that.
So just to be clear, the hazardous waste disposal is not my storm sewer. That's a joke, everybody. That's just
preferably not. Yeah.
Okay. No one smiled at that. All right. Thank you, Tony. I appreciate it. Liz, welcome to the city. We're lucky to have you. We have plenty of years and a space, so your job is probably safe for a while. Unlike other landfills that have very limited space. So just for reference.
Like Aspen, Liz, Pitkin County's landfill, on the front page of the paper.
I haven't read the article yet.
You should read that, Matt. It's interesting.
So direction from council is you kind of like the formatting idea. So Trent, Bree, Patrick from Parks, myself and Liz obviously can kind of move forward with this and put a more defined scope together and get it in front of you.
Yeah, I think we're here in the general direction. I'd also like to say when we do come over to or get to leaf and debris, one sec. When you get to like leaf and debris area, if we are able to do trucks to come out to people to pick up their household waste, we might want to consider going to pick up people's leaves as well, because not everybody has trucks. So, we can have that conversation when that time comes as well. Do you have any other direction for staff, or are you feeling pretty good? Matt, we're good?
We're good. Thank you.
Sorry, Jonathan, about the muting thing.
No problem.
One quick comment to Liz.
But Shelley had a quick thing.
Yes, and I meant to say welcome, Liz, and thank you. Very happy to have you on board. I have a lot of gardening friends that would always drive up to the Pitkin County landfill to get their compost. So I'm hoping we can put an end to that. Keep them in town and get them to go to South Canyon and buy compost there. So thanks.
Okay, thanks, Shelley.
All right. Next item, item number 21, city-owned property housing RFQ. Who is Hannah? I'm going to promote you. That's just a statement of fact. It's not a threat. There you are.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for the promotion. I'll take that. So the item before you is a review of a request for qualifications, a drafted document as recommended by the Housing Commission for the city-owned property housing project that has been before City Council a couple times now. I'll give a very brief update, I guess, on this so that we can move forward, and then I'll take some questions. So this is a request for qualifications, or a request for information, as the mayor likes to call it, to get an idea of what developers might possibly be out there for affordable housing project on 2 identified city parcels that staff and council narrowed down from Matt's original list of 119 about a year and a half ago. The RFQ does identify some project outcomes that Housing Commission would like council to pontificate on, if you will, and those include an AMI threshold with a priority range of 60 to 100% AMI for these units. Maximization of the density. I've included in the staff report the density that is allowed currently with zoning on those 2 parcels. Also that we're recommend that there's opportunities for ownership or rental, but there is a priority for ownership unit. And also a long-term public benefit. We've put a minimum of 30 years. You might have some feelings of extending that, so that's open for discussion as well. I would also update just a few from comments from last meeting regarding these locations. So we did have some comments that were well thought out, I would say, and Housing Commission and myself heard them. And I think definitely what we wanted to highlight was that if there are issues with one property over another, they don't have to be both move forward. Housing Commission definitely would like to move forward with both, but understand council has some concerns. And also pointing out, there was some comments on aesthetic of an affordable housing project at locations. And from a staff perspective, you know, we, whether it's affordable housing or market rate housing, our code dictates design standards that are held across the board. So this project is not asking for any variances to that at this time. So we do believe that it would be in conformance with our development code standards, and also would point to some very beautiful affordable housing projects that have come into this valley. If anyone has had the chance to go up to Basalt and see the Basalt Vista project up there, some housing commissioners did take a tour, and also Shelley was able to join on that. And that product type is probably an ideal going forward. I would highly recommend doing a drive-by and seeing the units because it's pretty astounding. So just wanted to mention a little bit on design aspects, that there is no differentiation between affordable housing or market rate. We're going to hold the project to the same design. So there are a couple things that we wanted to point out in this consideration of this item. Housing Commission is recommending that council make an indication on including fee waivers for this possibility, this development possibility. So we would be able to include that in an RFQ as a possibility. An indication of moving forward with both properties or possibly a single property, or conditions of timing on a particular property if there's some consideration with other development aspects. An indication if the parameters as outlined are in conformance with what you think this project should be. And there's also some language in the staff report talking about a preference for a land transfer, land lease, donation scenario. So if council has comments on that, we will word it in the RFQ to indicate a preference or not. So before you is the consideration of approval of moving forward with the request for qualifications, and also consideration of approval for funds for pre-development consulting and a land appraisal. As I mentioned last time, these costs amount to approximately $13,000. Those funds have been identified to be able to come from the community development funds. Director Jen Newton. And then also finally, approval of the project advisory team. I've included a list of names that have been put forward from individuals who have that are currently serving on some of the city's other boards and have indicated that they are willing and able to serve in that capacity. And with that, I will end and take any questions or not and let you consider the agenda item. Thank you very much.
Well, I think we all had a crack at making our opinions known last time. Pretty much, we went around the block quite a bit. We didn't have Ingrid here, and we continued this item so that she could weigh in and cast a deciding vote. So I guess I'm most interested in, I see Shelley's hand up, but I would say I'm most interested in hearing from Ingrid. Not that whatever you have to say, Shelley, isn't going to be fantastic. So go ahead, Shelley.
I just had a quick question for Hannah. I can't remember if you mentioned this in your whole list, and thank you for going through that quick summary. One of the comments that I heard last time was that there wasn't a lot of interest in having rental units, that if the city was going to, put land forward for community housing, we really wanted to supply a type of housing that's not really being given to us by the free market right now very much, and that we wanted to target ownership for small families and seniors and others. So would that be something that we could look at changing the RFQ so that we're really just playing to that ownership piece?
We can definitely beef up that section. Right now, it's open to ownership or rental proposals with a strong priority for ownership. But if council would like, we can change that to state that that is the product that we're looking for. So a little bit more direct in that request.
Okay, thanks.
Ingrid and then Paula.
Okay. Thank you all, and thank you everyone that I wasn't able to attend the last meeting, and that you guys are giving this opportunity to visit and speak up. So having been on a board and commission, always will be a little biased that the feedback and the work of boards and commissions should be so valued. In this case, we have professionals and community members on our housing commission that took a year or more to come up with these recommendations and these ideas. And they took into consideration so many variables about what our community needs, taking kind of an understanding of the deficiencies we have. And if ever there was a time to see the value of attainable and affordable housing, it is right now. It is, pivotal time to just say, we need this. Now, I tread lightly there because I do not believe that we need more studios and one bedrooms. I don't believe that we need to maximize density. So when I read your staff report about maximizing density, I don't believe that's the case. I think that, and I actually pulled from the comp code in page 72, strategies and actions to promote economic development. The city encourages a variety of housing types, sizes, and costs throughout the community, and in each neighborhood, a variety of housing types will create the opportunity for households with diverse characteristics. I think we need more 3 bedrooms. We need more places for families to maybe land while they establish time and get immersed into the community. So, I would like to give more direction to the Housing Commission. I just mentioned the one, and that is that we look at larger units and we don't worry so much about density. We look more at a sense of community and what the community is deficient in. I too am a proponent of ownership before rental, because I think that gives an opportunity for different diverse backgrounds economically to be community members. And maybe hopefully lessens that disparity between people. So I'm a proponent of the lower AMI, if possible. And then for those questioning public lands and us using them or whatever, I will once again reference the comp plan, and that's page 43. And it talks about city-owned land. The city of Glenwood Springs purchased many large tracts along the east bank of Roaring Fork River in order to reserve a right-of-way. Moving on from that, it said, in addition to right-of-way uses, there are a number of vacant city-owned parcels that can be developed into affordable housing or reserved for parklands. So in this case, the comp plan, which is a guiding document, and the one we have right now is the one that we need to use until we have a new one. And this indicates that land such as this should be appropriated for affordable housing when it's directed or suggested by either us or our boards and commissions saying this is a good use of it. So there you go, Jonathan, our mayor. There's my feedback.
Thank you. I think we all value that as a council. I don't want to make it about me or whatever, but I appreciate all of that you bring. You have a lot of history with P&Z, so I think that's really valuable. Paula.
Hannah, one of the things that I would like to consider, because I know this came in conversation afterwards, is there was concern about in the last meeting that the Iddings property was not a good time to develop at that time. And can we add a qualification that says that development wouldn't occur until after Southbridge was either approved or in process or something along that line, so that we could look at the potential of doing the RFQ, but keep in mind that that particular property would require a delay in actual development. And I know costs change, I know all of that, but it's just, that seemed to be a stopping point. And other than finding other parcels, which all had different problems with them, that would be one thing that I would like to see considered. And then I agree with Shelley and with Ingrid that for sale is really the direction to go. I like Ingrid's idea of really kind of starter home ownership for small families. And I know that we can't do that exactly, but that's just a preference. And again, I don't think this is a growth question. I think it's an affordable housing question. And I've been in enough meetings with FAB, with business owners just saying they can't find them. To state that again, that I too worry about development after a development being approved, but I think this is a different issue.
Thanks, Paul. Charlie, then Tony. Not Charlie. Tony, then Charlie. Go ahead, Tony. Thank you for keeping me straight.
Thank you, Mr. Wellman, very much. I'm not going to repeat what I said last time. I encourage you all to read the front page of the Aspen Times today that we just talked about. It says, Pitkin County landfill expansion set to begin later this month. Housing construction boom in Pitkin County could shorten lifespan of additional 5 acres. And what it goes on to talk about is they're going to run out of landfill. But forget landfill. Shelley, Paula, think about water. Think about streets. Think about schools, supermarkets, pharmacies, stores. Think about the amount of traffic that you're going to increase if you build. And I just fundamentally disagree with you, Paula. This is absolutely about growth. And this community doesn't want to be, an Aurora or an Arvada or a Highlands Ranch. We are in a tiny little valley surrounded by 3 mountains, and it's not the city's role to encourage more growth. I think we need to wait. And frankly, I don't care what the comp plan says. I think the situation has changed. And I really think that while special interests may be for this, including construction and other special interests, the community is against it. But that's why I don't support this. Thank you.
Charlie.
Thanks. I'm not going to repeat my comments last time either. I think this one is a little bit of repeat. I think about just going ownership. Rental shouldn't be in the mix because I think that's going to push people that way. Some of that gets into the and I always forget the tax plan opportunity zone stuff. And I know these 2 properties are, or at least I understand that in the opportunity zone. And I got to be both properties, and I agree with the timing comments that somebody made. I apologize. I had track of it and I've lost it. I agree exactly with what Ingrid says on the variety of housing, and I think it's a good idea. So the two things I'm just going to add is the term. If we're not going to own it, and Carl I think mentioned the last meeting, I think we should maximize the term without having to go to vote to the people if we're not going to own it. And as far as fee waivers, which no one else mentioned, I think that my view of fee waivers is I would consider fee waivers. I don't want to make it, yeah, we're absolutely going to give it. I think it's going to depend upon the project and how it all fits together. But I certainly would not be opposed to fee waivers if the project was right. Thank you.
Thanks, Charlie. Any other comments? Go ahead, Shelley.
Sorry, are we able to make a motion, Carla, or are we limited by a motion that we can make at this point?
No, you're not. I mean, this is outside of that land use hearing context. So go wherever you want to go.
Okay, I was going to try and make one. Would you like to make your comments first, Mr. Mayor, or?
Make my comments after you make your motion, Shelley.
Go ahead. Okay.
Yeah, you seem ready.
And based on the comments, I would like to move that we move forward with the RFQ for the community housing request for qualifications on both properties, that we do revise the RFQ to make it consideration of for sale units only. And let's see, there was something else in there. And that we do we need to approve the $13K funding in a separate, that we approve $13,000 of funding from community development to work on the pre-technical.
You can include that in the motion. I'm fine with that.
Okay.
I'd go ahead and include it.
And I think that's all I have for now.
And I will second the motion, but I'm curious if you'll add on there that we revise it, the RFQ, that the project does not need to maximize the density.
Sure, I am happy to include that revision.
Okay, perfect.
That's been moved by Shelley, seconded by Ingrid. Further discussion. I'll throw my couple comments in there. I think that I can't disagree with Councilor Hershey more in some respects, that people should be able to live and work in the community which they serve in. I'm really scared of this community being a hollowed out community. Winter Park is 90% second homeowners. That is a hollowed out community. Councilor Wusso's comments from last month, I think, shook both Councilor Kopp and I, because we've had a conversation about that, about how people are buying second homes and real people that have made up this community, tradespeople, the people who are us, people like us, are quickly going to become extinct in this town. So I think it's a moral imperative if we want to keep a semblance of this small town character. Not to be capricious, but if we want to do that, then we need to be looking at things like this. We need to, traffic is solved. The worst thing you can do for traffic is tell everybody who wants to move to the valley but they can't afford to live here is move down to Rifle and Silt, jam up I-70, and then try to get to Aspen. That's about the worst thing you could do. But we import about 70% of our workforce into our community. So having people be able to walk to where they work takes a lot of cars off. Having people be able to get on, ride Glenwood, and commute to where they're working in town takes a lot of cars off the road and helps with traffic, helps with our community, allows our community to have working class people still. I'm under no delusion. The last 18 months has disabused me of any thought that my daughters will be able to live in this community when they grow up, unless we have something like this. So I think that when we are looking at these things, I can't vote for it. That being said, even with that, I do appreciate people trying to carve out, what if we don't do the Iddings property, or having what if we take the Iddings property and put a condition. I just can't philosophically or morally get to where we put any development anywhere around here and add one more car to an evacuation route without Southbridge. Even the contemplation of that is just tough for me personally. I think this is great. I'm supportive of this concept. I think when this came up over a year ago, I said I had issues with the Eaton's property, but I was supportive of that. And so I'm sorry if I gave people some false, and really capricious viewpoints and conflicting opinions. So I think that I agree that we shouldn't negate the possibility of density. We shouldn't negate rentals. We are missing townhomes and duplexes and medium density. So I think we should give preference points for medium density. I think we should give preference points for sale units, but I don't think we should exclude high density. I don't think we should categorically exclude rentals either. I think if we get something back that's medium density and rentals, maybe. If we get something back that's high density and for sale, maybe. But I don't want to necessarily exclude anything, even though I'm not going to vote for it. So I like the motion, not going to support it, but I love the conversation. I support affordable housing 100%. Just not in my backyard. All right. Any other comments?
One point of clarification for staff, that the project advisory group is included in your motion, Shelley, of the names that are listed.
Yes, if we can roll that into this motion, why don't we do that? Does that work for your second, Ingrid? We approve the project advisory group as proposed.
Thank you very much.
Hannah. Thank you, Hannah. And I think if possible, the thing that I left off was the fee waiver, but I think we can leave that up for negotiation in the pro forma of the project. If that works, we'll just leave that out of the motion for now.
All right. Staff good? All right. Ryan, let's call the question.
All right. Counselor Hershey. Counselor Hershey.
I'll take a thumbs down. If you don't
Sorry,
have-
I couldn't hear you. No is the vote.
All right. Counselor Kaut.
Yes.
Counselor Wusso.
Yes.
Counselor Stepp.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Willman.
Yes.
Mayor Godis.
No.
It passes 4-2.
Thank you for your time tonight, Council.
Thank you, Hannah.
Geez, who mows their lawn at 8 o'clock at night? All right. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Housing Commission. Next item is the Two Rivers Trail recent grant award and pending project. Who do I need
I
to?
would pull over Terry to describe the project, and Jen's here, so.
All right, Terry, whenever. Who would I get you over? My fingers are so fat and capricious.
Good evening, Council. I'd like to describe a project that we were recently given an award through the Colorado or the CDOT Main Streets grant program. This is a project that we had been hoping to build for a while. We recognized the need for this project when the Iron Mountain Hot Springs began developing. At the time, Gretchen and Andrew McGregor, our former community development director, and I met out on site and talked about, all of the new pedestrian movement that would be coming through this area. And we were concerned about pedestrian safety even at that point. We recognized that, with the caverns and the Iron Mountain Hot Springs, we would see more people walking up and down that road, Devereaux Road, which is constructed on an embankment. There really aren't any sidewalks there, and CDOT uses that regularly. Colorado State Patrol uses it regularly, and it is dangerous for pedestrians. So we were fortunate to receive an award of $150,000 again from the CDOT Main Streets grant program. The current estimate for the project is $900,757,063. We are working still on developing the plans. The plans were actually, have been under design for a while. Steve Beckley authorized the design and has been working. We have been also working with SGM on an appropriate location. If it's okay with you, I'd like to share a screen and I'll show you about where the project would go. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So just for orientation, up here on this side of the screen is Highway 6. This is Centennial Street, headed in this direction, so towards the Iron Mountain Hot Springs. This is our Two Rivers Park here. This is the skate park and the Two Rivers Park driveway. So the area that we're proposing putting the trail is in Two Rivers Park. It would connect here at this intersection and then take people directly through the park, kind of at the bottom of this, the embankment for the road, and then connect directly into the pedestrian bridge that crosses I-70. Right now, the pedestrian bridge does have an access that takes you into Two Rivers Park, but it's out of direction. And as we found when we constructed the park, the closure of that bridge and that access really led to a lot of outcry from various different people, business owners and employees that lived over in that work over in this area. In terms of their regular access along the road. So I think the sidewalk would serve both citizens and also our tourists that move through this area. For our Summer of Music, it will be a better access for some of those patrons as well. So in terms of the project costs, again, the current estimate is $900,757.63. We have our $150,000 grant. Matt has offered $150,000 of the water and wastewater funds. We do have to relocate an old force main that's coming through here. And we're going to take it further into the park and make a more direct connection into the restrooms, the park restrooms over here. $50,000 would come from our capital projects fund. $300,000 has been offered by the Beckleys, Steve and Janine Beckley, to support this project. The balance is about $260,000, $261,000, and that would come from our A&I funds or from the $1 million grant match. And with that, please let me know if you have any questions.
I saw Charlie's, then Paula's, then Shelley's. I don't know if that's the order, but that's the order I'm going to go in. Terry, would you mind not sharing your screen so I can see
people? Sure.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Charlie.
Yeah, my question, Terry, was, and I'm just thinking about how people do things. If they got to go down the hill and walk along the bottom of the hill and then back up the hill, are they going to do that, or are they going to walk in the roadway? And that's my only concern. And you're the engineer in this, but people don't like to go out of their way. And that's, even though it's down a hill and it's safer, are they going to follow that route?
Yeah, we are still working on the profile of the alignment there, but, we're just smoothing out, some irregular grades. It's actually going to be a pretty smooth grade from the bridge all the way to the intersection. And the one thing that I didn't show you, and I should have, Steve Beckley's also building a sidewalk along the north side of Centennial that will connect directly into Iron Mountain Hot Springs. So there'll be a crosswalk from this project directly over to that crosswalk and make a direct connection into Iron Mountain. I think that people will use it. I think it will be more convenient and safer.
Charlie,
I think it's my turn.
Okay, go ahead, Paul. Thanks.
Terry, two questions. So right now where that current pedestrian bridge is kind of drops down and heads back into the park, that's not getting removed, or is it getting removed? I mean, are you still keeping that access as well?
We are going to make a direct connection into the pedestrian bridge. So the bridge is not being removed.
But going down into the park.
But going down into the park and directly along the road. So, you know, instead of walking in the road, they'll have essentially a pedestrian path in the Two Rivers Park side that leads you to the intersection.
I'm sorry, I'm not being clear. So right now you take the bridge across and then you take and then you turn into the park and you're going down along the fence line. Is that portion going down along the fence line getting removed?
No, that'll stay too. So there'll be two directions you can take at the end of the bridge.
Okay,
Sorry.
thank you. No, that's okay. I wasn't explaining myself well. And the other question I had is you just had, and I hadn't put this together, but you talked about you're removing, or Matt is moving some piping over into the park for better access to the bathrooms. How is that going to disrupt the park when this construction goes on as far as people being there? Will it mess up our memorial garden to the Storm King firefighters? I just want to get a better picture of what you guys are thinking of there.
So I am not clear on the timing, but I think that Matt said that it really could be, it's going to be a board force or sanitary force main, and it'll actually be through the parking lot. So it won't be near the Storm King Memorial. So I believe that, you know, there may be a disruption in the park services for a few days, but there won't be any other disruptions.
And can we time that for winter or fall when there's not as much activity going on in the park? That's my other question.
That's a downside. We do have a requirement to complete this project within 8 months. So an accelerated schedule, and so we would have to you know, disrupt the park functions, you know, sometime probably in the early to late fall.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Nice job, by the way.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paula. Shelley.
Thanks, Terry. This just seems like a great project. Thanks so much. It's really good to see it move forward. I think it'll be great for safety and all. I did see on the plans that we're removing quite a few trees, some of them larger and older, but I didn't see a landscape plan at all. Is there a landscape plan and a budget?
You know, there is no landscape plan at this point. It does come near these, you know, there are some trees that are adjacent to the skate park. And we are still working on the final plans. You know, if Deborah and Steve would allow me a few more dollars, we could probably put some trees back, I think. You know, I imagine that those are, you know, not planted trees, but trees that have just grown up over time. And I'm sure Brian would have some good suggestions on what we could replace those with. But you know, I think that it wouldn't be a large addition to the project to put a few trees back.
Okay. Yeah, if we had the possibility to do that, or if there are any trees that it would be worth saving, I'll leave that up to Parks, but that was my comment. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for staff? Yeah, okay. Anybody from the public like to comment on this item? Seeing none, I will bring it back for a motion. Go ahead, Paul.
I'm sorry, I just have the short agenda. So the motion is to go ahead and approve for us to move forward and accept the grant and move forward on this project. Is there something I should be doing beyond that? Sorry, I don't have my agenda open. It's not like a resolution. I move that we move forward with this project and use the grant funding and the contributions from the Beckleys and for the transfer of funds that Matt has talked about for moving that piping so that we can start this project and get it in place within the 8-month timeline that's designated.
I'll second it.
And I want to say it was a wonderful motion.
Thank you. I always rely on the notes, and it was like, wait, I have no notes.
Been moved by Paula, seconded by myself. All those in favor signify by saying aye or raising your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed. Motion carries unanimously. All right.
Mr. Mayor, could we take a quick break?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's come back at 8:25.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Paula. Bye.
All right. Should we get going? There we go. All right. Let's jump back into it. We're on item 23, Financial Advisory Board Grant Award Recommendations.
Which I believe is me. And just, you guys had a work session on this afternoon. Just some new information since then. The Summer of Music, we had them down when we said 2,500 for 3 nights. They're only doing 1. Their permit didn't match their request. So that is more like $500 with $1,000 deposit. If it's something council is interested in doing, I would recommend just the 500 that they could then use for permit fees, and we could just hold back like 1,000 in case anything goes wrong with the park, in case there's substantial damage. We went ahead and updated the spreadsheet to have it not reflect extra funding for a way out. That is, the original ask was 4,500 for junior achievement. The original ask was 2,000. So we've moved that down to 2,000. Raising a reader, the original ask was 3,000. So we moved it back down to 3,000. And with that, let us know what you guys want to do.
Paula and Charlie, we probably want to take up the 2 items you have conflicts of interest on and discuss those separately. Let's maybe.
There are 4 items, Jonathan, 2 for Charlie and 2 for me.
Okay.
Can I just suggest, Jonathan, that you identify what those 4 are and set those aside for right now, and you guys can discuss the rest to the extent that you want to, make a motion on it, and then they can recuse themselves, and you guys can address those remaining 4.
Okay. And what are those 4? Paula and Charlie, could you remind us?
Youth Zone in Middle Colorado Watershed Council.
And mine is Mount Valley Developmental Services and Riverbridge Regional Center.
With those 4 set aside, who has questions, comments about the remaining slate? Shelley, go ahead.
I do not have questions. I was going to make a motion that we pass the grants as recommended by the Financial Advisory Board, with the exception of the 4 that include the conflicts of interest for Councilors Willman and Stepp, and with the revisions stated by the city manager.
And I will
I'll second. Oh, I'll let Ingrid second. Go ahead.
I'll second Councilor Cope's motion.
Moved by Shelley, seconded by Ingrid. Further discussion. The only one I would want to probably revisit, I think it's Catholic Charities. That 30,000 is almost 20,000 more than they've ever received from this committee. I think if they come back and had a more focused ask, but they have a very similar ask, and it's a very similar ask amount every year, and every year we give them 12.5. That's not to say that's a reason we shouldn't give them 30,000, but 30,000 does represent entire 20% of our entire budget that we're giving out this year. So I think, at least for me, that feels incredibly generous to just one organization. And I would probably vote to reduce that amount myself. But those are my comments. Go ahead, Shelley.
I would just argue that in the times that we are in right now, and with coming out of the pandemic, and there are a lot of people, I think part of what Catholic Charities does is they help with assistance for lower income residents. They help with rental assistance and other items like that, which really works to help keep people stay in their homes and not become homeless. I think there's nationally, we keep hearing about the eviction threat coming up, and I just feel like there's likely justification for a higher amount at this time. So again, I would defer to the judgment of the FAB on that.
Sure. Any other comments?
Sunny adventures about to begin. The Amazon app. Delight. Warmer weather is in. Shop on the go for all. Order and track your package with ease.
See, whoever is
Wherever you play.
background, is that me? I think that's me. All right. Moved by Shelley, seconded by Ingrid. All those in favor signify by saying aye or raising your hand. Any opposed? Motion carries 5-1. All right. Let's consider, I guess, Charlie, let's consider the two that you're going to recuse yourself first. So if you would jump off proverbially. And we are considering Mountain Valley Developmental Services and what's the other one? I'm sorry.
River Bridge.
River Bridge, thanks.
Mr. Mayor, I would make a motion to support those two, River Bridge and Child Help Center and the Mountain Valley Developmental Services Center.
Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify, I'm sorry, further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye or raise your hand. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. All right. Charlie, if you're listening, you can jump back on. Paula, if you want to jump back off.
But Paula, what are the two? Oh, she left. One is youth zone.
Yes. And what is the other one? Sorry.
Middle Colorado watershed.
Ah, yes, of course. I will move to approve both the youth zone and the Middle Colorado watershed.
I'll second that also.
All right, moved by myself, seconded by Shelley. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye or raise your hand. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. All right, Paul, if you're there, you can jump back on. I think we're wrapped up. Yeah, all right. Next item on the agenda. Maybe Paul actually did actually step out. Can someone text her and let her know we're back in? Next item on the agenda is the Glenwood Springs Utility Assistance Program. Hi, Paula.
Okay. I will take this one, but if I mess anything up, Matt and Steve are certainly welcome to correct me. When we started the discussion last year about water rates, we had about 4 work sessions with you guys before you approved them. One of the things that you made very clear was that you wanted to have a pot of money available to help low-income individuals kind of bridge the gap from what the old water rates were to the new water rates. We reached out to a nonprofit based out of Carbondale River Center and talked with them, because we'd worked with them with COVID funds, and talked with them about how we could do this. What we've come up with is, if someone qualifies based upon kind of federally recognized low income criteria like food stamps or school lunches, then they will automatically qualify. If they fall behind on their rates and they need help, then they can get what we estimate is the gap between what they were paying and what they would be paying over a 12-month period. We're trying to streamline this to make it as easy as possible for both finance and people applying for assistance. And this is kind of the best we came up with. I pulled, $200,000 kind of out of a hat. It's not a magic number, but it is the majority of the marijuana tax funds that we have in reserve. We have about 300,000 in reserve, 50,000 we're going to put aside for a detox reserve for the 2022 budget, like you guys discussed at the last meeting. So $200,000 felt about right, but that is certainly up to you guys. And this would go, I think there's a flyer we've created that I think will go out with the utility bills that have the increase next month.
Go ahead, Paula and Shelley.
Deborah, is there, just a question, is there any funding from the cigarette tax?
I think when we looked at how we could pay for this, the marijuana funding is the best one to use because of how the question was written. I relied upon legal advice there.
Okay, thanks.
Go ahead, Charlie.
I think it's a great idea. I think it's a way we can help ameliorate some of the impact on the financially challenged community members. And so I would move to approve this plan up to $200,000.
I'll second Councilwoman's motion.
It's moved by Charlie, seconded by Ingrid. Further discussion? Go ahead, Shelley. You're muted, Shelley.
Thank you. I had one quick question for Deborah, just on the funding source. Will this in any way impact our funding for some of the youth programs and other things that we have funded through the marijuana tax?
No, it will not. It's in a reserve for money we have not spent.
Okay, kind of carry over. But it
Yes.
leaves us, as I understood it, still leaves us 100,000 in reserves.
Yes, of which 50,000 is kind of emotionally committed from the last meeting for detox.
Okay, right. All right, thank you.
I did want to point out that I think we're paying just over $3,000 in admin, which is a great deal for us.
Ingrid, then Charlie.
I just wanted to give credit where credit is due and just gratitude towards Councilor Willman's energy and enthusiasm in getting this together and just coming up with this idea and recognizing the impact with a lot of foresight that this would impact a lot of communities. And he was really forthcoming and just like finding a nonprofit to collaborate with. And I just want to say thank you. And then also to Deborah, just her creativity in finding the funding through the city as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Ingrid. And Charlie he battled the beginning of this with us the whole way. So thank you, Charlie.
Councilwoman, what say you?
Well, you're welcome. And I think it's a great program. And, I got it going, but Deborah and her staff really did a job of getting it taken care of and getting the regional center to do this. And my only comment that I was going to make before that was to say, if this money is not used, if we don't use the full 200,000, it should go back into the marijuana reserve fund. And that will be part of my motion if the second agrees. I can't remember who seconded.
Ingrid.
I will do that. I will.
All right, Paula, last words.
Just real quickly, Deborah, what kind of marketing campaign are we making sure to get out to the public so that they know this is available?
I think as far as we've gotten, and if I'm wrong, someone can correct me, but we're putting the flyer that they created in the utility bills that have the increases on it. So I think that is the most direct route. Like, I'm sure we can, do a press release and all that fun stuff, but I think people actually getting the flyer in English and Spanish when they open their bill that has the increase is about as good as we can get, truly.
That's perfect. It'd be great to see PR pieces too, just so people know what we're trying to do to help. Thank you.
I agree. If we get, if we get a press release out there, I think it's a good idea. Some people like me shred their bills. They never look at them. So.
All right. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye or raising your hand. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right, next item on the agenda is Arts and Culture Board appointment.
Yes. I don't know if we have staff speaking on that, but there's a memo in the packet. I did interview Kyle Jones for the Arts and Culture Board, and I certainly will recommend him. He's eligible. He's a music teacher, and I think he will be a great addition to the board. And his term will be expiring because he's filling in for another seat that was vacated. His will expire in 2022. So I would move that we appoint Kyle Jones to the Arts and Culture Board with a term expiring in March of 2022.
I would second that, Mr. Mayor.
All right, it's been moved by Shelley, seconded by Tony. Further conversation? All right, all those in favor of appointing Kyle Jones, raise your hand or signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right, next item. Running through them now. Oh, we'll slow down here. Electronic participation for city council meetings. This is, to refresh our memory, how we on city council want to, if we want to, or how we interact in future meetings, primarily in person. This was brought, I think, Carl can probably do a better job. It was brought to us about 1.5 years ago, maybe even 2 years ago. I believe Councilor Hershey and Councilor Willman and Steph had just been elected. And at that time, I think technology wasn't necessarily well proven. And there was also concern about the impersonal nature of it. So now that we've had kind of technology, we feel a little more comfortable with that. I think it's back before us to see if we want to reconsider it. So go ahead, Carl, take it away.
But Mr. Mayor and Carl, can I ask you just quickly, could you address the scope of this? Does this include participation by the public and staff and by applicants and the community, or just the council?
It just was addressing the council participation. And I do think that you raised some good points, Councilor Hershey, in terms of what council wants to do with the participation of applicants in person or online. It's certainly, given the number of consultants that live and work in, say, the Denver area, traffic consultants, things like that, there is potentially an advantage to allowing those to participate electronically. And the public, as we've obviously talked about that, where you guys are going to go with that. Certainly council chambers will be set up to do that. For purposes of tonight's discussion, I think it really is more narrowly focused on how you all want to conduct meetings, and if you want to have your participation be electronically or not. When I drafted this, and when actually this is very similar to a policy that my firm has drafted on behalf of a number of jurisdictions. A lot of this feels dated now, given that we're doing this all online and everybody is participating electronically. That having been said, as we move back to in-person meetings, I think the question of if and when one of you or more than one of you is participating electronically is something that you guys really probably should decide on before you're in a situation where you have to decide on the fly. You know, this was built around direction that was provided by the then sitting council, which might have initially not included Tony and Paula and Charlie and was the one before it, but we didn't act on it, I think, until you guys were on board. I don't really remember. There were some strong feelings around the personal or participate. Yeah, it wasn't when you guys weren't, like, that's, yeah. Around personal, at the time, there was a lot of concern and desire to have people participate live and in person, and we didn't have the video conferencing capabilities. And there are two instances where I still have some concern regarding electronic participation. One is in executive sessions, and part of the reason for that is it is difficult to, you know, as we all look at what's going on in the background, or you hear a dog barking, or there's somebody at an airport. Confidentiality, obviously, we've been working around that this year, but that is something that obviously is always a concern. And with regard to those executive sessions, both in terms of what's happening live and also what can be challenged later, as that it really wasn't confidential because somebody was sitting in an airport and there's this argument. It's relatively remote, but I think it's out there. The other one relates to quasi-judicial hearings and when you're voting on a matter, and if, you know, for instance, Ingrid is on vacation and participates electronically, and she votes on a matter, did she have the benefit when she, in that hearing, when she was voting, did she have the benefit of what was going on, the back and forth with council, the creation of conditions, the discussion of findings, all of those things is everybody on equal footing or not? You know, on most land use decisions, I used to always say we aren't going to be, you know, having 4 3s that often, but we've been having a number of 3 3s and 4 2s and things like that. So I think that's an area where we just can talk about it. I'm not absolutely wed, as I probably was before, to saying like, no, that just doesn't work. I do think there are enhanced risks, and the possibility that that one member who is not there in person in the context of voting maybe doesn't have the opportunity to fully participate. But that's something, you know, you guys have been doing this for a while, and I don't know how you feel about it, whether you feel like you would have that ability to fully participate if you were the one lone council member who was on video versus everybody else being live and in person. So with that, I'll answer questions, and I just kind of want to hear you guys' discussion and take on where you'd like to go with this.
I have a question, Carl. So in your opinion about, and I think we have done to some degree of success, some degree of great failure, executive sessions remotely. And so I'm okay with that recommendation. I think land use, I struggle a little bit. I think if we do adopt this, I think having one person, and I think what I'd go with in my mind is not having more than 2 people. So it's kind of like first come, first serve. I'm going to be gone. I want to participate electronically. You got it. Or you have to negotiate with somebody else. So that would be kind of my overarching. But I think for land use, I actually feel like if I'll just speak for myself, if I was gone and I was in a room in Orlando, in a hotel or whatever, and I was able to interact and participate in that meeting, I would think that I would be more able to render a more informed decision in real time, asking and hearing the applicant, than I would be just listening to a tape. And I think we allow for that now, to listen to a tape and just see that and not interact, and then join up at the next meeting or be able to vote on something. So I guess I'm not sure what the difference is.
Let me explain what I was talking about is a little bit of a nuance in that, which is being an active participant in the motion. I mean, think about the last couple of land use hearings. I don't want to revisit them, the subject matter, but just think about sort of the interaction and the discussion that has gone on at the level of making the motion. I think part of it is what's your comfort level that in that decision-making role, you are comfortable doing that remotely. Because depending on the technology, you may or may not be able to see the facial reactions of Paula or the body language of Shelley, or, that Charlie is dozed off, or like whatever's going on, right? And so do you feel comfortable? I mean, my question is to the group, do you feel comfortable that you have the ability to pick up all those nuances when you're making that decision, as opposed to when you have listened to everything, but then you're live and in person as the decision maker with that motion, right? I think that's the piece that I guess I'm really asking you guys how you feel about, right?
Okay, thanks. That helps clarify. Paula, then Tony.
I have a couple of questions relating back to that one that you were just discussing, Carl. I guess the question is visibility. Are we, when you're remote, am I seeing something like this where I'm seeing things on screen, or are we talking just access by phone? Or since we really haven't seen that setup yet, I'm just
right. No, absolutely, and I think that I would say obviously a land use hearing by phone is not going to work.
Right.
I think that would be, I think we would have to be in a situation where you can see the presentation that's on the screen, you can see the applicant talking. I don't know yet either exactly how that's going to look, and I think it's going to take some fine tuning to do that. And therein lies my concern about being part of the vote when we don't know how smooth and fully participatory you get to be.
So that question is a little bit up in the air just till we see what that is. But that's my other question. And it kind of, one of the things that kind of stood out, and maybe I misunderstood it, or maybe I just need clarification from you, is there was a line in there about other council members voting whether or not that person could participate electronically. Can you clarify what you were speaking to there?
At the time when we were talking about this, there was some concern because there was mixed feelings in the group that they sort of wanted, it's almost like approving the absence, if you will. You're allowed, I think, 3 consecutive absences underneath the code, unless they're excused by council. It was a little bit along those lines that you were saying, yeah, it's okay for you to participate electronically, because essentially, if you weren't participating electronically, you'd be absent from the meeting.
So that would have to happen with each absence?
I think that the idea at the time was to avoid it being just a casual thing where, somebody's gone for an extended period of time and they're only participating electronically. And in fact, I think it was Steve Davis that was kind of the most adamant about the importance of being in the room and looking his fellow counselors in the eye. If I remember right, Jonathan, that's kind of what he was pretty passionate about that. So that's why limiting the number of times it could be used during the year, limiting the number of people that could be remote. Obviously, COVID is a little bit different thing, global pandemic. Those were the ideas behind it. It was trying not to make it incredibly easy to do, because Jonathan at the time was, going to go travel the world, I think, or something. I'm teasing Jonathan because you're like the huge proponent, right?
I remember Rick Voorhees was. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Tony, then Shelley.
So, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to ask you I recall we met, remember, at the Rec Center when we first talked about this long before the pandemic, and you were a big advocate, not because you wanted to travel the world, but you have kids and you guys go on spring break and vacations. And at the time, I think I was adamantly opposed to it, not because you couldn't look someone in the eye. I don't know how you do that from a dais when you're facing forward, but because I had concern, you have to be there. But I think we've all learned a lot in the last year and a half. So I don't have a huge issue with it as long as it's not a regular thing. And like Carl said, as long we don't have to bring up executive sessions, but as long as it's not, something where you really need to be there. But I don't know what that is really. Land use, if you have access to video and Zoom, it's just like you're there. There's nothing different. But I wouldn't want people to be in Texas all the time and get to be on council in Glenwood Springs and sort of have a house here and get to live there. You know, and the city charter, Carl, does talk about absencing yourself from when a city council person moves, like one did, then they are off the council. So that's not the purpose of it. But as a temporary stopgap, I guess, Jonathan, I'm down on 180 and I support you. If you still support this, because of what we've seen this year and because of the advances in the technology, and I think it's only going to get better, that this, plus it cuts down on commuting, and like a councilman saying, oh God, I'm in New York, like Charlie's in New York, but I got to fly back now because I really got to be at this meeting, and then I'll fly back again, or I'll drive somewhere. I mean, why for a 4-hour meeting when he could accomplish anything he needs to do here? I just to bring up the courts, Carl, I know with court hearings, it's worked very well. There's a lot less travel. Witnesses have appeared. I did a hearing today with a doctor from Denver and a caseworker from Rio Blanco and an attorney from Colorado Springs, and Judge Norton was here in Glenwood. So, you know, it's made it a lot easier, and it's with the video and being able to question someone with the video it's different than on a phone. So I think it really works well. So I would support this. Thank you.
Thanks, Lily. Shelley.
I agree with what Tony said. I support it also. I like the 2-day a year limit, I think is where we're at. And there were a couple of items. I was just researching it a little bit because a lot has changed since we first discussed this, and we are more used to it and everything. There were a couple of items that I actually sent to Carl for just kind of recommendation to add. And one of them is as a paragraph that says, when you attend electronically, that you're considered an off-site attendee and that the minutes reflect that. So the minutes will reflect who is at the meeting in person, physically at the meeting, and who attends virtually. I think that will help us with tracking, but it will also help us if there's any question in the record or understanding and communication and things like that. And then the second one, there was actually a paragraph on the rights of the remote member, which I thought was interesting. And that just talks about that, you know, if we're going to allow this, if someone can attend remotely, they basically have all the rights to speak and be voted and called on to vote and all of that as a regular attending member. So I would put that out there and see if that's something that council's willing to add, those two things, and get also Carl's opinion on those, what he thinks of adding those. But otherwise, I support this.
Yeah, I actually think they're great. They're great additions, Shelley, and I'm sorry I got a little distracted with the other issue that I had to deal with. So I didn't have a lot of time to spend on it. But I do think it is good. And, you know, it sounds like, unless, you know, I kind of know where Steve is at on this. I mean, he was always a firm believer in personal participation. I might suggest that we use Charlie as a test subject a little bit about, because I have a lot of faith that if Charlie feels like it's not working for him, you know, he'd maybe, you know, acknowledge that. We have this hearing coming up on the 29th. Is probably the first time we'll do, have the opportunity to do a mixed land use hearing. Because I think that's the one. Everything else I feel like we can kind of, you know, you can kind of get through. That's the one where participation is going to be the hardest, I think. And the most, we just need to shake down the technology. I don't know how you feel about that, Charlie.
I always like being test subject, so yeah, I think that's fine. Yeah, let me come back to it because I want to comment some other things and I don't want to get ahead of Ingrid, but I wouldn't oppose being a test subject.
Okay. Go ahead, Ingrid.
Oh, I was actually just going to make a motion to pass the ordinance. So how do you feel about that, Carl? Am I getting?
Make that motion. Is it going to be with electronic participation at land use or not? Because that's, and with or without maybe Shelley's couple of conceptual additions that I can bring back on second reading.
That's exactly the way that I was actually going to do it, was a motion to approve the ordinance with the recommendations and suggestions of council thus far laid out.
Got it.
Unless someone wants to talk before I do it.
I'll second that.
Well, let me make it. Hold on. That was just kind of like, but now I can actually do it. Okay. So I'm going to make a motion
I'll second it.
on City of Glenwood Springs ordinance number 2018-20. And do I need to read an ordinance of the City of Glenwood Springs?
No, you're fine.
Okay. That we direct staff and council to approve this with all the recommendations of that we've kind of laid out here and any that might come.
We'll bring it back on second reading and you guys can fine tune anything that's left.
Perfect.
I'll second that.
That was a good one. That was a good one.
Moved by Ingrid, seconded by Paula. Further conversation, Charlie.
I'm sorry to go ahead of Ingrid. I'm not comfortable with the ordinance the way it's worded because it says telephonic or electronic participation. I'm not a believer in telephonic or other electronic. If it's by Zoom where I can see the person, I'm okay. I'm not okay with somebody calling in. And so I'm not in favor of this ordinance at all. I guess my view, Ingrid, with all due respect, is that even though we need to get this done and sooner rather than later, I think we should delay action on this until the next meeting, have Carl come back with a rewrite. I think we should exclude executive sessions, which I think you was included your motion, and exclude, I don't know, exclude quasi-judicial. Quasi-judicial land use, sometimes they're different. So there's some issues there. And I'd really like to see what it looks like in council chambers, very honestly, before I approve this. I have to tell you, I'm uncomfortable with this if it's not going to give us the ability. For instance, if I'm participating electronically in this meeting on the 29th, can everybody see me so they know they can watch Charlie and how he reacts to what he's hearing as well as everything else going on? I don't know if our technology is going to allow for that. And if it isn't, then I may not support me participating electronically or anyone else on a quasi-judicial proceeding. I don't mind, you know, if it's a normal city council meeting, doesn't have those issues, it's not executive session. That's my hesitation. I don't know that we need to rush this ordinance through right now. I'm going to vote against this motion if it stays for that reason, because I don't like the way it's worded. I think it's got to be video, and you got to have technology that allows you not to cut it in and out, which is tough. I cut out once tonight. It's the first time that's happened in a year and a half of doing this stuff, or how long we've been doing this. And I have pretty good internet. I have broadband, unlike Mr. Govis. So
no, I have broadband, by the way.
Oh, I forgot you're the mayor. You get that. No, seriously. I mean, that does make a difference as you have that higher speed. So, and I don't know if they'll have it in New York. I know my daughter has. So that may make it. So those are my thoughts and comments.
Shelley,
Okay.
Shelley,
just quickly, I think that's a really good comment about the telephone or telephonic, what the wording says. And I think that's probably reflective of that we're bringing in an ordinance that was written a couple of years ago, and technology is changing very rapidly. So I think that's a good comment, and I wouldn't have a delaying this until we're back in person or next meeting, to let Carl kind of review it from the newer technology side.
I'm comfortable withdrawing my motion and just giving council direction that we want to wait.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fine with me too. I mean, for me, a lot of this was just kind of getting you guys a sense of where you're at after you've done this for a year with all of us electronically. And I'm going to put a small, a small thing in terms of like, as we step through this to consider is, Deborah's participation electronically or mine, depending on the circumstances, or other staff. And I think that's something that we want to talk about on our side of the fence, if you will, about how we feel about that too. It doesn't necessarily need to go into this ordinance, but I do think it's something that is an option that is potentially available.
Carl, could you put in there that you have to appear electronically from now on at all meetings?
I actually,
withdraw
I
my
have,
second.
I move
I'll give
second.
you my comment. I'm sorry, Tony.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
My comment, Carl, what you said about you endeavors, I think you two, absent exigent circumstances ought to be there in person if we are. However, I'm not so sure that other staff need to be there. I mean, we have staff, that don't live in the community, and sometimes we get to their issues till 9 o'clock at night. If they're making a presentation and we can see it and see them, and the public can see them, I wouldn't be opposed to that. But you're our primary staff people, and I mean, if you're traveling, Carl, and you need to participate remotely, that's a little bit different. But I think generally speaking, you would never need to be in person at the meetings.
Yeah, and that's actually what I was thinking about. There's not a particular reason why one of us needed to be there for the appearance. My goal is always, if I'm traveling, especially if it's for personal reasons, to have somebody else at the meeting and not me. That's the whole point of why I'm on the road. Anyway, I think I'm happy just taking his council direction. I will try to update it to kind of sync up with where we're at technology-wise now. And take a look at, it was nice of Shelley to provide some of that additional information. And this is something that's going on everywhere. So there's plenty of, plagiarism that we can do probably on some thoughts on how to word this stuff. So happy to do that.
And I will withdraw that second since she withdrew her motion. So there we go.
Point of order, just for my sake, does the second automatically goes away if the first withdraws?
Second has to withdraw, or else the motion stays on the table.
Actually, the first can't withdraw without the second.
Second withdrawing.
Okay, well, learn something new every day. I have a couple comments about it real quick. I think it's worth debating whether we should require somebody to also participate in the work sessions that precede the meeting. I think if you're going to commit to a council afternoon and evening, maybe you should. I'm not sold on that. I do think it's worth debating when we bring this back up, though, if we want to require that. I think I agree 2 times a year. I would also say it shouldn't be 2 times in a row, just because I don't think people should be able to take off for essentially a month and a half and be able to still participate, because after a month and a half, are you really as connected to the community as when you left a month and a half ago? So I would add that as a small change. I totally agree with Charlie. Any reference to telephonic and electronic will be replaced with video only participation. And if you don't have the technology or speeds tested out beforehand, then you're just absent. And that's just the deal. I think it's, Charlie, you had a good comment of you want to be able to have us see you when you're not there for your body language. Dude, you're a hood ornament. You are a statue of just blank, like you got a poker face that doesn't quit. I honestly, and I'm kind of being funny, but I'm being serious. Like, I don't need to see you. I think it's actually more significant that you see all of us. So when we get to the technology piece, if we can't see you, then that's okay, I think, because I don't get a lot from you anyway, not you specifically, but I think that's not going to change the world. But I think it's more important that you feel connected. The person who's gone needs to feel more connected and involved in the conversation than the people there to that one person who's gone. I would say that it's never more than 2 people or never more than 1 person that can be gone. And then I don't like that section in there where we talk about it has to be approved and voted on if we can. That feels like very like mommy, may I kind of stuff. I think like there's a reason we have PTO, paid time off, versus vacation days and sick days anymore. I don't want to have to justify whether I'm on vacation or this qualifies. If Shelley's taken her father to a doctor's appointment on a Friday morning and wants to be in Denver that night to not have to fight traffic the next morning, I don't want to have her to have to bring that before council for our blessing, or if somebody's on vacation or somebody's dealing with something of sensitive nature, or, you have the gout and you want to sit at home because you're not feeling great. Like, I don't care really. And I don't want to put those preconditions. I say, if we do 2 a year, that kind of weeds out the weird stuff we might try to do. And it kind of sets a low bar of expectation that I think should be beneath us. Those are my comments for when it comes.
Can I ask you a question, Jonathan?
Sure.
The gout? What are you talking about? No. You said something about requiring people at work sessions. You meant requiring them to be there in person?
No. I didn't. And again, not to be capricious.
I don't understand.
Let me see if I can help. So at the time when this was originally drafted, part of the discussion, Tony, was that amongst council was that it was a kind of a forum shopping issue on people who just like they had their issue that was going to be on that agenda, even though they were on vacation, and they just kind of wanted to show up for that. And I think it was the thought was, I think among some of the folks was to, if you're gonna show up for that one thing, you need to show up for everything so that you're committing your just like everybody else is. And I think that was really what it was about, is so that people didn't just pop in and go like, oh, I'm sorry I'm late, but I'm here for item 13. They get through item 13, they vote on it, and then they're like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm having connection issues, and they're gone again just because they wanted to just be on that one issue that was important to them. So that was what it was about. I don't know, I don't know what the right answer is there, but I think that was what the idea of trying to stop that kind of behavior was.
Yes. And like I said, I'm not very wed to that. I just think it's a point of conversation because it was a point of conversation. Maybe it doesn't need to be one going forward. Shelley, then Charlie.
I just wanted to get a quick clarification. Did I hear you right, Jonathan? You were saying you didn't think we needed to see the virtual participant?
No, I think we do need to see the virtual participant.
Okay. Okay, I agree.
There's less importance for every nuanced facial tick for us to see the non-in-person participant. It's much more important for that person who, wherever they're at, to be able to, I think, observe us and how we're reacting to what's going on.
Okay, but I would still think it's important for council to see them, just because then we know they're not on a cell phone in a bar or
Absolutely.
Wherever. You're in a quiet place where you can actually participate.
100%. I
Okay,
agree.
thanks.
Go ahead, Charlie.
Yeah, just to try to verify the data or something. Yeah, in the work session concept, if you remember, for those who can have good ancient memories like me, in the code of conduct and the procedural stuff that was brought before us last fall and got waylaid for a number of reasons. We talked about work sessions and the responsibilities of council members. I was just trying to remember when the retreat is, which I think is the 12th, if my calendar shows me correctly. What I would like to do, kind of got through this last 2 weeks of fairly intense litigation issues. So I would like to begin working on that again and working with Carl and present something to council well in advance of that 12th, the meeting of the 12th. But I think it's a good place to talk about those kind of issues, because that's at least one of the ideas that I have for the retreat. Excuse me, the retreat is to talk about procedural stuff. How do we make things work better among the 7 of us in meetings and things like that? And that'll be a good base. Should give us some basis to work from.
Agreed. I think, to what's good for the goose is good for the gander as well. I think that if Deborah or Carl want to participate in, up to 2 meetings a year electronically because they have other work, life, sickness, health obligations, I think they would obviously try as hard as they can to make it happen. And I'll let you deal with your own staff. I do know that sometimes we've had presentation from staff who have not fantastic, awesome city broadband fiber internet. And so sometimes they're choppy and cut in and out. So I'll leave that to you, but I guess I would say from my perspective, staff should try to be there if it's early in the night. If it's not in the night, they can probably kick off as long as they have a good connection and a quiet place to be able to present. But I'll leave that to you. And then we'll just kind of, some of the stuff we'll just have to see our way through and go, we'll note when we see it, right? The Supreme Court precedent, Charlie.
I think we have enough direction and kind of drifting. So let's bang out this last thing and get one meeting closer to being in person.
Agreed. Next item, recommendation for group travel allowance.
I would say this is something that was brought up at the last meeting. Charlie, I believe, asked to go to maybe CML, and you guys said, put this back on the agenda. So we put it back on the agenda, and I'm handing it off.
Well, this is where Charlie says, it doesn't matter what we do, I'll still go and I'll pay for it. And I think that that is very chivalrous of Charlie. And I don't think we should be so capricious in what we do and how we allocate it out. But I think we really want to, and Ingrid and I talked a little bit about boards and commissions. I think we should, whatever we do tonight, I think we should also extend as training opportunities for boards and commission members, because training those people up and getting them more involved for their service, either on boards or commissions or for other service throughout the city or the community, I think has a huge value. So wherever we go tonight with things, I would like to also extend that consideration to our volunteers and the boards and commissions.
She said, hey, Lakeisha's out in the front. Anything else you want to tell me? Yes, Your Honor. Just I'm listening to you. Just a few things that I really want to make very, very clear. Okay.
Charlie, go ahead.
Ms. King, to try to get along with her.
Yeah, so, as Jonathan said, he and I chatted this afternoon about this, and, I think CML is important to the city. I enjoy doing that work. We're going to have a retreat, a board retreat, first weekend in July, 7th and 8th or something like that. So a couple of nights in the hotel. I just think we need to make those decisions. I'm going to go to the CML conference, which is going to be live in Westminster in September, and there's going to be 2 or 3 nights there. I need to know what the direction is. I don't want to be spending money willy-nilly, but on the other hand, I think that's important to what I can add to the city, and I think I've brought a lot back from CML in the last year as I've become more understanding of their systems. So I think it's important. As far as Jonathan's concept of the boards and commissions, I think the idea is good, but Jonathan, I think that's a budget issue for next year, not for this year, because we don't have a budget for that for this year. So unless we want to amend our budget to add stuff like that.
Well, I don't believe we have a budget for travel and training for this year for us either, do we? Oh, we do. Okay.
I believe you do. Steve, correct me. I feel like training and travel combined might be 11,000.
That's exactly right. There's 4,000 for travel and then $7,000 for professional development in the budget for 2021.
So I stand corrected, and probably that's right, Charlie. We probably do need to, we'll be talking about this in the next 60 days, starting, in the next 60 days anyway. So go ahead, Paula. Oh, you're muted.
I was going to bring up budget as well. And if we do bring this back for discussion in the next 60 days, I think we should look at if there's any discretionary funding, if there is training for board members. I do agree that that should be added. But really the reason I'm speaking up is that I do think that we should allow for this funding and move forward with it. I think it's important that we expand our viewpoint beyond this screen and the people involved in it. And I love that Charlie is representing us at CML and able to bring information back. And there's no reason he has to donate that, even though you'd like to see that, Jonathan. I think that we should approve that kind of funding. And I know you're teasing, so am I.
I did not.
I'm teasing.
Okay.
But I do think it's really important. Those perspectives are important. And in the past, prior to COVID, we as a council approved each expenditure. So I think that's really the question is, do we want to approve each expenditure each time it comes up or not?
And I think that's what this conversation is do we want to, how do we do it? And quite honestly, it doesn't matter, because will we actually ever say no? and if not, because that's a hard thing. If somebody wants to go to a conference and participate in something, it's very hard to say like, I just don't know if that's a huge value to the city of Glenwood Springs, blah, blah, blah. So if we're not going to say no, what parameters do we put on it? And do we need to? Is it an issue? Are we looking for a solution? Are we looking for what is it? Looking for a problem to solve a solution? So, you know what I'm saying? It's late. Someone else talk. Capricious.
I'll pay for my own travel if Jonathan buys beer after all the live meetings.
I think I'll lose on that one.
Well, on this round, I'm going to vote to approve Charlie going and paying, and we'll pay for it.
I think it adds tremendous value as well. Shelley, go ahead. Oh, you're unmuted.
Sorry, it's late. I would agree with Paula on that. It is, I don't know how much we've typically spent in last year's. If several council members want to go to the CML conference, things like that, or other training sessions, but and I don't know if there's a lot of inequity if one council member spends a lot more than another. That might be something that's brought to our attention, but I think it probably varies. And in my years on council, I haven't seen anything excessive. So yeah, I would like to be supportive of council representing the city with other groups and going to trainings when we can.
And I certainly would encourage everyone to go to the CMO conference. I know, Tony, I want to get done too, but I think it's
Enough already, Charlie. We're paying for it. Can we move on?
Yeah, okay. And I appreciate that. I'm tired too, but I do think that CMO is important. That conference, that annual conference is important. So that's not cheap if we all go.
I'll just bring it up. There's a cast meeting in August in Telluride. Hotels are very expensive in Telluride at that time. So I'll be camping. So if folks just want to pay for my miles and my campground fee, and I'll bring my own lunch. But if folks are okay with me going to that, then if we could take care of that as well now while we're talking, that I think that would be helpful. But I'm seriously camping, so it's not going to be expensive. Okay. Any other conversation? All right. I think we have direction. We'll approve this. I guess we'll continue to take it kind of, in general, we support us doing it. Obviously CML, if a bunch of us want to go, we're supportive of that. That's going to probably be a larger conversation about maybe additional funding at that time, but we'll deal with things like that, I guess, ad hoc. Is there a motion to adjourn? Oh, I'm sorry. City manager, city attorney conversation, reports.
Yes, I am more than likely on vacation next week. The only caveat to that is if my daughter is too sick from her second shot. And I will let you know if that's the case.
Have fun.
Thank you.
Anybody else hear that wild echo? Carl?
I'm not going to say anything, I guess.
I think we're good. Does anybody have a motion to adjourn? All right, moved by Shelley, seconded by Charlie. All those in favor signify by saying aye, or raise your hand. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. All right, have a good night, everybody.
Good night.
Bye.